is the air that I personally breathe. He is the energy that allows my life to continue forward. And as a symbol for education, he is the symbol for me of mind and intellect. He is the symbol for our struggle. And now in the twilight of his life, he's trying to put 60+ years of the energy that he has put into our struggle into a type of focus that we can understand and take it forward into the future. Many of you have known him longer than me. I have had the pleasure of having many visits and conversations with him over the last 10 or 12 years. We speak just about every other week on the telephone. He stayed in my home, and again, he is a very important inspiration to me and to us all. So with that in mind, I don't see him standing in the doorway.
He's coming.
But I would like to stop and have us greet our master teacher, Professor John Henrik Clarke. Thank you.
I appreciate being here again. I appreciate being asked to speak in a city not too far from the one that I grew to early manhood in Columbus, Georgia. Not terribly far from that little half-a-horse town called Union Springs in Alabama, where I was born. I appreciate returning to the South and participate in the continuous change. I have no illusions about the South changing to the point where it's not all of what it used to be when I lived here. It is still part of what it used to be, though there's been some cosmetic changes. A cosmetic change is almost like a lady's makeup. Take it off, or forget about it, and some days you don't wear it. Now the subject for tonight is a subject that a lot of people have stayed away from because for academic reasons, for tenure reasons, for job reasons, for personal relation reasons, they have not wanted to discuss the African Revolution. They have not wanted to call it a revolution. They have not been willing to say why it failed. They're not willing to say what will have to be done to make it succeed. If we are now a people at the crossroads of history, then we are not at the crossroads only of our history. We are at the crossroads of human history. We are on the cutting edge of the history of man. Then why have we not asked the question? A people so potentially powerful have so little power. A people, the most diverse people spread throughout the world. There's not a human society in the world where we have not touched and influenced. Why then, if we are the rightful owners of a piece of real estate called Africa, 12 million square miles, full of the richest mineral God ever created God and nature, and for me, God and nature is one and the same? Why then are we so poor? Who's managing our wealth? Who's managing us as we mismanage our wealth? How dare we call ourselves an independent people with independent state, when the only way you can be independent, you must manage all of the wealth-producing resources of the country that you own. I'm not talking about a country you invaded. I'm talking about the country that is the historical geography of your early development and birth. Why do we own so much and manage so little? And why is there so much confusion among us based on pure man-made nonsense? And why do we go to war with each other over organized religions without understanding that all organized religions were brought to countries by foreigners, fakers, and fools? You had a way of life, a spiritual way of life, superior to all organized religions before. Why then did you let foreigners bring to you something that puts you against your own brother, made you go to war against your own brother, turn your back while foreigners raped your sister and your mother and enslaved your brother, and do it in the name of a God they taught you and neglected the God you created? Something happened to your mind. You programmed yourself into a position where any foreigner with any kind of strength could take over the destiny of your country. There are countries in Africa right now so weak, a good Boy Scout troop could take them over. What is the excuse? When you find the strongest thing about a people, look on the flip side and you'll find the weakest. The strongest thing about African people throughout the world is their ability to be hospitable to strangers, to recognize the humanity of the stranger. The weakest side about African people is that too many times they are more kind to the stranger than to the relative. They invite the stranger for dinner and forget that they haven't even fed their children. It's a kind of kindness that's open to question. Now, what am I talking about? African people at the crossroads, talking about an African revolution that should occur, that did not occur in its true sense. African people at the crossroads, at what crossroads? The crossroads of human history, talking about the golden opportunity you missed because you could not find yourself on the map of human geography. And you kept identifying yourself with other people, sometimes other people who are failures. You couldn't go to Africa and understand the nature of the social systems in Africa that not only predates Karl Marx, it predates Europe itself. Now you got to go and get the European version of socialism. You can't read enough. Go back and understand that an African Pharaoh, Akhenaten, 1,300 years before the birth of Christ, announced the same theory from a throne and practiced it. The European announced the theory and betrayed it. Every humane theory that the European has ever announced, he has betrayed it. Christianity, Marxism, democracy, humanity. He never lived up to any of this. And yet you are following like a fool behind him with an empty basket, thinking you're going to collect some of his things in order to make something for yourself, and neglecting the richness of your own that you need to cultivate. Now, if you knew his history, you wouldn't follow after him. That if you knew the history of the Arabs, you wouldn't follow Arab Islam. You would understand that two Africans made Islam. Zayd bin Harith and Bilal. And that Ethiopia nursed Islam in its cradle and saved it. When they're about to be driven out of Arabia, the Prophet Muhammad said, go to Ethiopia, go to that land where no one is wrong. And he went to Ethiopia as Africans, hospitable to strangers, let his followers in, gave them a haven. After the death of the prophet, they went back and got the faith well underway. Now you think that you got to propagate, purify, and sell us Arabism, which is not Islam, because the Arab is a betrayer of Islam. You don't know who he is. He's part of the dirty waste matter that came down from the back door of Europe and united with the waste matter from the side door of Africa and the back door of Europe. He's the bastard child of a bastard child. Now you got to follow him. When he came to Africa, the Africans thought, because it was during the period of the Romans, that the Arabs and Islam would help to get the Romans off of their back. They were right. But the Arabs got Rome off of their back. The Arabs replaced the Romans on their back, and he's still there. A vulture, a slave trader, a raper. I'm not against Islam or any religion, but I'm willing to condemn at the risk of my life any religion that says their God endorses the slave trade.
Yes, sir. That's right. That's right.
Africans are being killed in enslaved in Mauritania right now.
That's right.
Africans being enslaved in the Sudan right now.
That's right.
Africans are being driven out of Mauritania who are Muslims because they wanted a pure Arab nation. Senegal is more Islamic than Arabia. And yet the Senegalese Muslims being driven out. A whole lot of people in the Sudan who call themselves Arabs are just black-skinned Africans converted to the faith, now turn against and enslaving their own people. And when you can't say anything about this, then you're hiding behind the skirt of God, letting your own people be mutilated. Now, if we are at the crossroads of history, history is about to change. I am not telling any of you to leave a church, or to leave a mosque, or to leave a religion. I am telling you everything that touches your life, every social thing, every political thing, every cultural thing, must be converted into an instrument of liberation or be thrown into the ash can of history. You have no time to waste. When you've got to deal with Christianity, remember, we did not follow European type Christianity, and to the extent that we followed it, we went wrong. When we created the independent African church, it was a church totally different from the European church. It nurtured us, helped to give us some of our first schools. The church was once the schoolhouse. The church was once the place we hid from the law. The church was once the place we went to when we had no visible means of support. The church was once the place we went because we didn't send our people to insane asylum, to take care of mental health. The church, all purpose, the church went back to the African spirituality before foreigners interfered with our spiritual way of life and started giving us some European garbage disguised as Christianity when it was a handmaiden of their conquest. Christianity became the handmaiden of European conquest. Islam became the handmaiden of Arab conquest. Now, listen to this statistic, and maybe you sober down and stop telling that damn Arab lie about Islam being the black man's true religion and Arab being the black man's true language. Islam is an AD religion, not a BC. The Arabs are an AD people. We had religion and language 5,000 years before the birth of Christ, if you live to talk.
That's right.
Why did I qualify? Why did I qualify? If I was much younger and made a statement like that, I would have my buddies at the door, one in front of the stage, in case I run for my life, I'd be able to get out of the building. My qualification, if you lived at all. Now, if you read John Jackson's Pagan Origins of the Christ Myth, he traces the Christ story through 26 civilizations, each with their separate Christ. Each 1,000 miles apart. You only know about one. Every nation has, every major people have their own Christ concept. If you read a little pamphlet by Joe Massey, The Historical Jesus and the Mystic Christ, he examined the historical origins. Now, if you read another book by John Jackson, written before his death, Christianity Before Christ, what's he talking about? He's talking about the fact that Africans practiced the same religion, identical religion, did not betray it, thousands of years before Christ. And he explains what St. Augustine meant when he talking about the conference at Nicaea, said that these people are trying to give us a religion we had 3,000 years ago. What's he talking about? And we had it 3,000 years ago, then we had it long before Christ. A lot of people do not understand that you got to make a distinction between organized religion and a spiritual way of life.
Say it again.
The African had a spiritual way of life that predates organized religion.
That's right.
This spiritual way of life was so good and orderly. He had entire societies that did not have the word jail in their language because no one had ever gone to one. All right, then what did happen? The family structure was so good. Within the family, they had judge, jury, all of this built into the family. The family structure was a miniature nation. Everyone who came into Africa declared war on this structure. One of the people that declared war on the structure, the last and most disastrous, was the Arabs. He is a major womanizer. You must never touch one of his, but yours is free country for him. Study the Gulf War. When America went there, they told America that I'll be for you, but there's certain conditions. If your soldiers want any prostitutes, you better bring them with you, because there'll be no Arab woman converted to prostitution. And if any of your women walk around here in skimpy dress, we'll take the rest of it off her and beat her behind. You don't walk around here no many bathing suit. America obeyed to the letter. And yet, right now, there are African women enslaved who work in the field, Arab farms in the day, and serve them in the bed at night on their command. Now, when you fail to do anything about this and keep quiet about this, you're more than a coward and a hypocrite. You're a liar in history because you do not understand. Remember, it was in Africa that we gave women something which we intelligently conceded that was hers all along: preference and equality. It was in Africa that the woman rode at the head of her army. It was in Africa that the woman headed a state for the first time. It was in Africa that a woman became a god for the first time. You get hung up with white women's lives. It got a damn thing to do with you at all. Our crisis at the crossroads that we are debating, everybody's concern except our own. We're hung up with everybody's religion except our own creation. No one creates any liberation movement for you. Slaves are never liberated. Freedom is something you take with your own hands, or you don't get it. We have encountered some misconceptions in history based on foreign invasions of Africa, based on our misreading of other people's literature that downgraded us, based on our acceptance of other people's words that's not applicable to us. We were never a minority. We number 1 billion people on the face of the earth. We should make jobs for each other. Now, let us start with simplicity. We don't need high tech right now. Let us start making our underwear. All right. That's something you change every day you can. Out of underwear, out of factories. Got to open up 10 factories at once. I made this proposal in New York at a memorial for Martin Luther King, what Martin Luther, in a speech called What Martin Luther King Did Not Learn About Mahatma Gandhi. Then I said, maybe if Martin suggests that we should not bury our beloved one in a coffin we don't make, we can take the coffin business away from the mafia and put some brothers to work building coffins. Coffins not even made out of first-rate wood. And a second-rate carpenter can make a decent coffin. Ain't no high tech. I'm not talking about everybody got to go to engineering school now. Why you buy all your coffins from somebody else? With all the undertakers you got, you mean we can't have one factory making coffins? Huh? We can't be self-sustained doing nothing? Don't tell me you can't make a handkerchief. Look, I've known Farrakhan for 40 years. I like him personally, and yet I have a running argument with him. He announces too much. It's an announcement and nothing more. A lot of ceremony without substance. He avoids too many issues. What are you talking about, marching 1 million people men on Washington? How many pair of shoes you 1 million men wear? How much gas it gonna take? How many hotels gonna hold you? All you're doing is making white people rich. And I suppose you save all that money and all that energy. You can build 300 supermarkets. But building a supermarket is less glamorous than before a camera posing on a march. I'm saying we suffer a disease where we have no doctors to cure. That disease is called ego starvation. We have a lot of ego-starved people. When they see a camera, they get hungry. Oh my God, let me get before that camera. Let me see my face. When the constructive work of building a nation is not being done, you start building a nation by creating the things essential to your existence.
That's right. That's right.
Why not say I won't wear any shoelaces I don't make? Now don't tell me you can't make a shoelace. Do the basic, do the durable things first. High tech later. Assemble automobiles. Don't even buy a whole automobile. Buy the parts and assemble them. The brothers assembled them, got a job. Any good charge can tell them how to assemble them. Very soon the brother's going to be doing it so well, Ford's going to ask him, hey, bro, you want a job? Got one for you. You're doing it faster than me. If you're skillful, they'll hire you. People turning you away or call you back. We've forgotten our skill. We've forgotten what we did without interference. We've forgotten we produced societies that had no misery. We lived out our Christianity and our socialism. We didn't preach about it, we just lived it out. And we discovered something very early in life that a lot of us have gone away from. Spirituality and not religion is the enduring thing for man, a spiritual belief. Organized religion gives you a ceremony, creates a rationale for what it does to other people. Spirituality did not succeed because with spirituality you can't hustle. No pew, no priest with fine piping, no Cadillac. What you gonna take up collection for? With spirituality, every person is his own preacher. Certain people are guides. After a while, when certain people learn more than others, and this person comes to the spiritual forefront, if he wants his sandals, we make his sandals. If he wants to travel, we give him a porter to take him from one place to the other. So what are they going to take our money for? He wants books, we get him books. So this is why spirituality fell behind and organized Christianity came to the front. It came to the front because it was an interesting hustle disguised as a spiritual way of life. When Islam came out of Arabia, they came out as conquerors. They violated the very word of the Prophet. The very Ethiopia that had saved them. The Prophet said on his deathbed, Islam would never forsake Ethiopia when Ethiopia is in distress. Right before your eyes in your own time, an Islamic zealot, Gaddafi, armed little Eritrea, who destroyed the political effectiveness of Ethiopia. No nation has suffered more at the hands of Islam than Ethiopia. And yet the Prophet has said, Islam will never forsake Ethiopia when Ethiopia is in distress. In practice, this is as big a lie as Christianity that helped to bring in the slave trade. Now, I'm not telling you to leave religion. I'm saying convert it to your use or leave it alone. Someone asked me earlier, how do we persuade ministers to get into the fight, to become more relevant in our fight? And my answer was, no demonstration, no leaflet, no shouting. Let him walk into the pulpit and see empty benches. You get the point. Never mind the Jesus message. We want a salvation message relevant to our existence right now. Massage my emotion with Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Give me something concrete that I can live by. Now, looking again at a people at the crossroads, I'm turning back to a lesson was taught to me in the Old Harlem History Club by Wilson Hergen's long since dead protege, Jackson. John Jackson was his protege, and so was I. He had said to me, John, we will have no problem getting to the door of the promised land. But we as a people will get to the door of the promised land and bunch up at the threshold and start an argument about whether to cross the threshold with our right foot or our left. And that's where we are right now, arguing at the threshold of liberation. Are we at the threshold of liberation? Our enemy realized that potentially we are the most powerful people in the world. They also realize that we're not going to do to them what they've done to us, because we're not going to waste that kind of energy. Of course, we'll knock him off our back. But who in the hell wants Europe? If he wants to keep Europe, keep it with our good wishes. But we want every inch of Africa. That's our home. I don't divide nothing there or share nothing there that you're not willing to share with me in Europe. I sure don't share any power. This is why I lost patience with the nonsense about non-racial government in South Africa. Non-racial, hell, I want an African government. Anybody can't live on an African government. The French don't argue about no non-racial government. They want a French-run government. No matter who lives there, it's a French-ruled government. If you don't like that, you can go home. Don't like their cooking, you can starve or go home. Don't like their law, you can go home. That's the government I want in Africa. Government so completely controlled by Africans is that it is your prerogative to leave if you don't like it. We'll show you where the airport is. We'll show you where if you want to go by boat, we'll show you where the harbor is. If you want to walk, we'll show you where the road is. Meaning out. But we don't share. I don't share no government. You no more than I would really share my wife. I ain't no fool. And yet you have Africans say, we can share. Where did he get his mentality from? Create a non-racial government. White people still control South Africa. White people still control all of the wealth-producing resources in every single African country, and there is no exception. The same thing as countries in the West Indies. Canadian company bought up the gold in Guyana. Do you know how much Guyana gets out of it? 5% of the profit of their own gold. Why in the hell didn't they send our young men to the mining schools of the world?
That's right.
Dig the gold yourself. Put it on the markets of the world yourself. Then why are the students studying nonsense? Studying management, don't even know what to manage. Why can't we follow the example of the Japanese? They didn't ask their students what they wanted to study. They lined them up and said, geography for you, medicine for you, oceanography for you, airplane design for you, automotive design for you, locomotive design for you, and you better get it. And they got it too. And made Japan a modern nation.
Right.
They lost the war, suffered 2 atomic bombs.
Right.
The same people who defeated them are now begging them for commercial space in the world.
Yes.
Not one demonstration, not one leaflet.
Yes.
Nobody shouting yellow power. You shouted black power, you had no power, black or otherwise. And didn't know what power was, still don't know. Power can be had through cooperation. You have to stop the silly argument among yourself and cooperate. Somebody's going to have to call the tune. Then you got to sit down, who's best to call the tune? Pick out the most intelligent one, and when that intelligent one works it out, say, okay, we go this way, there's no argument. Go that way. That's what the argument at the threshold of liberation is about. How do we go? But some people not only argue about how do we go, but whether we should go. Some said we should go the Marxist way. Some said we should go the Democratic way. Some said we should go the Republican way. We got to go the Christian way, you know. After all, we got to have the law. Somebody else has got to go the Islamic way. The idea is to go. We have to stop dividing ourselves based on things fed into our mind by foreigners who fed them into our mind so they can control us. We can take Christianity and convert it into an instrument of liberation that it was supposed to be in the first place. And so with Islam, if you understand Islam, you might think this is a sore spot with me, but anything that demeans the women is sore with me. And anything that restricts the presence of the woman is a sore spot with me, because we came out of a society where we were willing to let her go as far as her mind could take her without feeling the slight bit insecure. Women who feel insecure with black men in power are dead wrong. Black men who feel insecure with women in power are dead wrong. Because we didn't base it on men and women. We based it on ability, and we respected ability. There should be no man bashing or women bashing, but cooperation between the two. Now, this is the kind of society we had. There are certain ceremonies that couldn't even start until a woman sanctioned it, because that was a woman's function in that society. Certain ceremonies, she had to function because it related more specifically to her. Now, if you remember the first session of Roots on television, where nearly everything was wrong, remember the scene when the boy comes home from ceremony of manhood and circumcision and tells his grandmother, played by Maya Angelou, men don't let women tell them what to do. So, you lying fool. You don't even, the people who wrote the script was dead wrong. Alex Haley shouldn't even let that in the script. If he knew the territory he was writing about, he would know that West Africa was Islamized by Islamized Africans. And they were intelligent enough to let the main custom remain intact. And the main custom was then and now matrilineal. The royal line came down through the female side. In East Africa, the Arabs installed Islam. They destroyed the matrilineal. So East African Islam is different from West African Islam. Go to East Africa, go to West Africa right now and see who rules the marketplace. Now Not only women, but women with a society called the Sandy Society. They have their own court, judge, and jury. And if you wrong one of them and they put you on trial, you don't even know whether your wife is the judge or not. And you will be punished. And you will not get away with anything you do to them. All the stalls owned by men, run by men, are owned by women. I went to buy something at one of the stalls, and I had a big bill, and I wanted change, and he called the lady over. I didn't know who she was. She didn't look any different from the other market women. But the woman was a millionaire. See, millionaires here, you be in a stretch Mercedes. She walking around in the marketplace, looking at like a regular market woman. Called me over and she picked them, looked at my money, made sure it was authentic. And she held it in her hands and looked at the person who gave it to me and looked around, and I was wondering what this is about. I think I can trust her. We went to some place partly secluded, and she opened that big belt on her waist. The lady was padded with money and made the change. I say, you're absolutely safe, sister, and I admire your industry, but would you tell me in American money just about how much you carry on you? She said, well, I haven't counted it since this morning, and I've been collecting at my different stalls, but it might be from $50,000 to $100,000 in America. I said, aren't you afraid to be robbed? She said, everybody knows me. And everybody knows I have money. If anybody touches me, everybody will know who did it. And she said, his life wouldn't be worth a franc after that. Look at the safety now. This is a Muslim country. It's a Muslim woman ruling the marketplace, going from different stalls, those different stalls that she owns, and collecting money, making change, carrying from $50,000 to $100,000 on her waist. No man is disturbed about it in the slightest. No man is propagating, you women are taking over, plotting everything. No nonsense like that. Some men are coming up to hoping she give them a job. I'm saying the best values of society that you created did not die. And while we're getting into European this and European that, we forgot that before the first European wore a shoe or lived in a house that had a window, we already had functioning societies before we existed. How can you sit still and hear somebody say he built the pyramids when he hadn't built a shoe for himself in Europe, a house with a window, or hadn't even written a book? And we're at the crossroads debating something because we have not looked and examined the history of our countries well enough to understand that we have already done what people are saying should be done. And we don't have to argue between Marx and Leninism because we had produced a substance and practiced it long before there was a Europe. There's some confusion between the Karl Marxists and the Groucho Marxists. The Grouchos seem to be making the most noise, while the Karl Marxists seem to be in retreat. Why don't we tell people we've been around this track before? And what you got to say? We never formalized things. We never dogmatized things. We just lived it out. With the first invasion of Africa from Western Asia in the 1700s, then again in the 1600s, the recovery, the second invasion, was 65, thereabout. And finally the invasion from Iran, 550. So devastated North East Africa. It opened the door for the Greek Alexander, who began to copy African history, African ceremonies, began to wear the toga. Then the Romans, who picked up the idea of the toga from the Africans, stopped killing, finally forced Christianity into being through taxation and misery. Finally stopped killing Christians and became Christians for political reasons. And the European is still a Christian for political reasons. And why are we following behind his Christianity, not knowing that his Christianity is some fakery dreamed up at the conference at Nicaea, 325? It is not Christianity at all. It's the handmaiden of his conquest. Finally, he made such a mess of it. A camel boy began to grumble, asked for reform. Failing to get reform, he asked for a new religion. This new religion was Islam. Now Africa is in another power track of history. The Africans favored the Arabs at first. The Africans were in Spain. Understand this, because most of you will not read history. The Africans were in Spain, well entrenched, 50 years before the Arabs. The general was Tarak Ben Azad, known as Jebel Tarak. The Rock of Gibraltar is named after him. There's a classic work written by a Turkish woman, Halit Bagiba. She said the army was as black as ink. The general was blacker still. The general was Tarak Ben Azad, and she wrote a book bearing his name, Tarak Ben Azad. Why did the general look blacker than the rest of them? His horse was dressed better than the kings of Europe. His horse, silk and brocade. He was riding a white horse. The others had another kind of horse that showed off his blackness. One day Hollywood might have enough nerve to put that in Technicolor. The ladies were so impressed. Each one put off a garment and throw it at the feet of the horse. Tell him, I'm available. Africa gonna have to own part of Hollywood before that one is made. But that would last almost 800 years. But the rise of Europe after the Crusade would put us into another bind. Europe rose discovered shipbuilding again, started the slave trade, began to scatter Africans throughout the world. They had been scattered voluntarily throughout the world through adventurism and voluntarism. Now they're being scattered as slaves. We're in another bind now. We will not come out of this bind. The 19th century will bring us back to African consciousness again, something now mistakenly called Afrocentricity.
That's right. That's right. Come on with it.
It's African consciousness, because you should not avoid using the word African, all of it. Don't use no fro. But that 19th century in the Caribbean islands, with its massive revolts that brought Haiti into being,
That's right.
Africa's anti-colonial wars. Winston Churchill said these Africans who never heard of a military school or wore a store-bought shoe outgentlemen some of the finest minds of Europe. Now at the end of the 19th century, Africans began to negotiate, appeal, these Christian Africans now, appealing to the conscious, the Christian conscience of the Europeans, not knowing he had no Christian conscience. It was lack of Christian conscience that led him into the slave trade. Accepting the Pope's word when the Pope told Spain and Portugal, you are both authorized to reduce to servitude all infidel people. Edward Williams is very good on this. Read his documents in West Indian history. Read his book, The Caribbeans, from Columbus to Castro. And if you forgive the modesty, read my book, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust. The documents are good. Jan Carou's new book, The Conquest of Paradise. That's a book by a white writer called The Destruction of Paradise. No shortage of information. All you have to do is to read it. Tell you exactly what happened. What happened was not democratic or Christian or kind. A whole series of nations were destroyed. Indigenous American nations, Federated nations, Cherokee nations, Algonquin nations, Crow, Blackfoot, all of these were nations, not tribes. This is the preface to 1619, when they would bring about 20 Africans to Jamestown, Virginia. We began our formal induction into the American labor market. We were not the first slaves in America, or the second. They tried to enslave the indigenous Americans. Didn't succeed because he knew the forest, he knew the gully, he knew the river banks, he could slip away. They had more success in enslaving the whites. Read a book by Lerone Bennett called The Shaping of Black America. Read his first 2 chapters. If you don't read nothing else, read his chapter called First Generation, and read the 2nd chapter called White Servitude, how whites were enslaved too. Then finally, they had to sell the poor whites on the skin game. At first, poor whites had no vested interest in being against blacks. They were poor, they were struggling, They were landless. What was the interest in being against blacks? And some of them were indentured servants, as most of the early blacks were indentured servants. They began to marry each other. But after they sold whites on the color scheme, they forbade that kind of relationship one to the other and destroyed it as ruthlessly as they destroyed the white and black farmers' alliance. And the man who destroyed the black and white farmers' alliance later helped to establish the Ku Klux Klan. All of this is forgotten. All this 19th century struggle with Douglas, forgotten. The 19th century struggle in Africa, when Africans did not negotiate anything. They took their spear and their shield and went to the battlefield and negotiated in blood. They announced that negotiation through their manhood. At the end of the 19th century, missionary-trained Africans, Caribbean islands, Africa, Christian Africans in the United States began the whole track of appealing to the Christian conscience of people who wasn't Christian in the first place. Now they would start the Pan-African Congress, started by a Caribbean lawyer, H. Sylvester Williams. It is a bit of irony that the three great Pan-Africanists all came from Trinidad. H. Sylvester Williams, C.L.R. James, George Padmore. I never knew H. Sylvester Williams. I knew James, and we were friends and colleagues till the day he died. I knew George Padmore in the United States, and I knew him again in Ghana when I was there in 1958. I asked him a question. He told me, stop meddling in his foreign business, in his personal business. I say, of all of you were Pan-Africanists wanted the unification of the African world, all three of you have had children by a black woman that you never married. None of you have established a long relationship with a black woman. Where is your Pan-Africanism when the door is closed and the bed is ready? Man, stop meddling. My personal business is my personal business. I left it there. It's a contradiction. And yet, all three men made a major contribution to the concept of the unification of African people. Du Bois, who never liked being called the father of Pan-Africanism because it was incorrect. Du Bois was a guardian of truth, and he wanted to be called the guardian or the keeper of the Pan-African tradition. He never said he was the God, he was the founder of anything, and he wasn't, and he didn't pretend that he was. But his over-enthusiastic followers gave him credit for a lot of things he did not do, failed to give him credit for a lot of things he did do. Intellectually, Du Bois was the finest example of a functioning intellect we have produced in the whole of the Western world. As we entered the 20th century, we entered the 20th century with a debate. The debate was over Pan-Africanism and nationalism. The debate was over something we haven't even settled today. What kind of education we need for tomorrow? What kind of education we need for our children? We were debating between Booker T. Washington's approach and Du Bois's approach. We were wrong then, we are wrong now. Both Du Bois and Booker T. Washington was right. They did not contradict each other. Both were speaking out of their respective environments and background. Booker T. Washington, born a slave, and from his background, he never seen his father, but he suspected he was white because he was a little less than black. Du Bois, a New England aristocrat, and you can be a New England aristocrat without having money. Good family, good education, good manners, good friends, hadn't disgraced yourself publicly or privately, so you're an aristocrat. So he was accepted. Du Bois wanted to go to Harvard as the young men of that town, a socialist town. There used to be whole socialist towns in America, where the education of the brightest young men were taken care of by the town. Knowing that he got the high marks and good to book and well thought of, knowing for sure he would go to Harvard, they sent him to Fisk. And there Du Bois discovered who he was. His white friend, including girlfriend. There he discovered he must enter race work. The best thing that could have happened to him. It shocked him out of his illusions. He knew that was a dividing line. And he began his race work. Eventually he would go to Harvard. He would finish his PhD thesis there, a work still worth reading. The suppression of the African slave trade to the United States, published in the Harvard series of books by students. 1903, he would publish a little work that should be the preface to understanding Du Bois, Souls of Black Folks. And one essay, not criticizing Booker T. Washington, but taking some exception to some of the things Booker T. Washington has done. Why don't we just get the book? You can read it in less than an evening. Why don't we just read Souls of Black Folks? Don't take my word for it. I want you to check me out. I want you to try to find me wrong, because I know you can't do it. I read his Gift of Black Folks. Then 1915, read his classic essay, Africa in the War. Then read his little book called The Negro, a general survey of African people in the world, doing exceptionally well what I've been trying to do in a condensed form. Give you a picture of African people functioning in a global situation where the basic headquarters of African people throughout the world is Africa itself. So long as we are shy about identifying with Africa, we got a problem that's not going to be solved. Italians never shy of identifying with Italy. Germans are not shy of identifying with Germany. The word German America is longer than the word African America. You can say that. Your tongue don't fall out. No, you got to abbreviate it. Afro. They ain't no fro. So therefore, Afrocentricity is a personal exercise. But if it has any meaning at all, it must be called African centricity.
That's right.
Then if it's called African centricity, it has to broaden its base. It must include the great 19th century radicals. It must include a good analysis of the man who's been called the father of black nationalism, Martin Delany. It must include an analysis of his work, the condition and elevation of the colored race. It must include his work of the history of the concept of race and how it developed. It must include Frederick Douglass. It must include Frederick Douglass with some kind of honesty. Too many times, the whole women live movement want to dismiss Douglass because he wasn't exactly as kind to his black wife as he should have been. All right, I'm sympathetic toward his black wife. But that don't change one iota of Douglass's force, the clarity of his analysis, and the program of the fight he left for us, and his great legacy. The music of Mozart is not less sweet and melodious because he beat his wife, although I'm sympathetic toward the wife. I don't see why any man should beat any woman when he can vote with his feet and walk away. Makes no sense to me. But if you're going to go into that 19th century, you got to deal with this awakening of African consciousness. William Wells Brown, our first novelist, his book about Ethiopia, other books about Ethiopia. You got to do an analysis of George Washington Williams' 2-volume history of black America and how he handled the African question and brought up the question of the elimination of the word Negro. I'm saying Molefi Asante has made a contribution to our consciousness and our direction, but he's merely started, and he's neglected too many monumental figures in our history, too many monumental contributors to our history. Our argument started in the 19th century with the Pan-African Congress, but let me conclude this before the Baptist preacher in me gets the best of me and I talk forever. We went wrong when we failed to understand of all the Pan-African Congresses, the most significant one was the Pan-African Congress in Manchester, England, 1945, convened by Kwame Nkrumah, George Padmore, Nnamdi Azikiwe, John Stone Kenyatta, later Jomo Kenyatta, because that is the Congress that planned the independent explosion of Africa. The other Congress were begging for the right for Africa to have the kind of education that will equip them to rule themselves. In 1945, these conferees said, we are ready now. We are ready to rule ourselves now. We want independence now. Finally, Nkrumah is brought home and became head of the pre-colonial government and eventually head of the state. And this frightened all of the colonial powers, because if Africa became head of that country, started controlling their mineral wealth, they could close down Western industry. They had to stop this in a hurry. So they began to overthrow government after government until they finally overthrew Nkrumah. They'd already killed off Lumumba. Sooner or later, the Pan-Africans from the north, Nasser, would be gone. Ben Bella would be imprisoned. Now we're at the crossroads debating again direction, debating someone else's ism, forgetting something, that Europeans, irrespective of religious belief, irrespective of political belief, main interest in Africa was to control Africa. They had no other mission, and the left wanted to control Africa as much as the right. So we need not get into games played in the name of political opportunists and Johnny-come-lately called Marx and Lenin. They too were playing a European game, a game for European control. They not only did not know anything about the cultures and the politics and the people of Africa, they did not know what they needed to know about the people of Europe. Otherwise, Russia would not be at war with some of her own colonies. Had she recognized the culture difference and the religious difference in these colonies, these people were willing to stay within the Russian orbit, but not willing for anybody to dictate everything to them and use their resources at the same time. Russia could have yielded something to them and still kept them as partners and treated them with some equality. They could have created a socialist or communist parliament for Europe, recognizing each state as independent, associated, and treated with the Soviet Union. But they had to make the stupid mistake of declaring that Russia is officially an atheistic nation. I have no great love for the organized religions of the world, including Hindu, that created the concept of untouchability. Yet I'm a strong spiritual human being. I know that there's a spiritual force in the universe. And one of my students asked, Professor Clarke, inasmuch you don't believe in organized religions, where do you think you're going to go when you die? I said, I ain't going nowhere. I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to live in what I did, live in who I taught, they bury the man, continue the plan. I would no more live without spirituality being a part of my being than I would get on all fours and walk with the dogs. For it is spirituality, not religion, that lifts me higher than the dog. Now when I can make the seasons change, make the oceans roar, start a hurricane and stop one, I will tell you I no longer believe in God. Because when I can do that, I will be God. I know I will never do that. So while I do not believe in organized religions because all of them are hypocritical. I believe in love people. I believe in myself. And I have a special love for my own people, whose fight I've been involved in most of the years of my life. And for them, I've only gone to jail for very honorable reasons, leading a riot or something, nothing. I've not disgraced myself. And I look good once they examine me in total. There'll be nothing in my whole life that you need to feel apologetic for. I have considered myself to be a product and part of the ownership of African people in struggle, and I have never been outside of that struggle. Our Holocaust need to be mentioned here in conclusion, because it was not only the death of so many of us, it was the death of aspirations, it was the death of hope, it was the death of possibilities, it was the death of dreams unfulfilled. I am saying this did not end at all. We will live through what we leave behind for our children and what they subsequently will leave behind for their children. We have suffered the longest and most brutal Holocaust in human history, 100 times worse than that internal family affair in Europe. Faith has spared us for something. Faith has not spared us to feed poison in our veins. Faith has not spared us to douse our bodies with alcohol and die in a drunken stupor. Faith has spared us to deliver a message to ourselves and to all mankind. We need not burn anyone's church or demean anyone's religion. But when it touches our lives, we need to convert it into an instrument of liberation, and we need to stop worrying about who cares about what we do, so long as we are clear that this is what we want to do for our liberation. We need more independent schools. We need an independent political school or political association. We need something to preserve the languages of Africa. There shouldn't be a black child over 10 who is not skillful in computers, in math, and in science. You have to instill into this child from birth, you're born to lead.
Right.
You're born to bring a new son to a people, cast away, brought out of their homes against their will.
Right.
You're born to dig so deep into your history, you can tell the world with accuracy, long before there was a Europe. African people created a philosophical thought that went into the making of what you think is Greek philosophy, but is nothing but African philosophy.
Right.
African people, again, created the spiritual thought that went into the making of the Bible, something you have written into myth and lied about. We gave the world its first humanity. And if faith spared us to give the world its first humanity, then our great message to the world is a message of enduring humanity for all mankind. And remember, and teach your children to remember. and to have confidence. If we did it once, we can, of course, do it again. Thank you.
Hello? All right. Thank you for that film. I have two questions. One, what do you think is the role, this to you, Dr. Kambon, as always, what do you think is the role, that African leaders play at the threshold of liberation? What do you think is the role that African leaders play at the creating confusion at the threshold of liberation? And two, the Council of Nicaea, for those of us who do not know what it is and why it's that fact about Christianity has been hidden. What was the Council of Nicaea?
Okay, just in terms of leaders, has anyone ever heard of COINTELPRO? 1, 2, 2.5, 2.375. Okay. One of the goals of COINTELPRO was to prevent the rise of a black messiah who could electrify the masses of people, and also to discredit, anyone who may possibly do that. And it listed people who may have been able to have done that at that time. It mentioned the late Kwame Ture, at that time Stokely Carmichael. It mentioned Martin Luther King. It mentioned Malcolm X could have done that. He was assassinated at that time. But when you look at things like collecting biometric data, when you look at stop and frisk in the US, when you look at all these things, all of those are to get your information because they don't know who the black messiah may be. And this is why this morning we had to talk about Black Lives Matter. Anytime you see an African be killed, male, female, old or young, we should not look at that as a killing. We should look at it as an assassination, because the leader that we're looking for is each and every one of us. You understand? So when we shouldn't say, oh, they were killed, we should say that's an assassination. Every time, a child is shot in the back or any of those types of things. So I think that instead of looking at these, perhaps those who are in government or whoever as a leader is outside of us, I think that we need to look at our own actions, at our own behaviors, and see what is our own role. Within my sphere of power, okay, I'm a research fellow. So what's the most that I can do as a research fellow? You understand? If I become director, then you'll know that there's a new director. Because as my sphere of power, expands, then you should see a commensurate change with every single thing that I touch. Like Dr. Clarke said, anything that you touch should be an instrument of your liberation, or it should be thrown into the ash can of history. So that's my take on that. The leader isn't anywhere outside of you. You are the leader. So if you are on YFM, then you are the leader on YFM. If you're whatever you're doing. So that's my take. The second part was
Council of Nicaea.
Council of Nicaea. So that's 325 CE, what some people refer to as AD. And this is Constantine basically deciding the canons of Christianity. At that time you had Zoroastrianism, you had all these various branches and sects of Christianity, and they had different ideas. Some said there was no such person as a Jesus, whoever existed is just a spirit. Others said, no, we're going to say it's a man. No, others said, various types of things. And what that was to do was to canonize and say, this is the official story. And then once they decided on that, then what they said was, in hoc signo vinces, and it translates to, in this symbol we will conquer. And we're talking about the Bible, we're talking about the cross, we're talking about all these things that they use. So this was basically, and then at that time they killed off all the other types of Christians. So if you said, no, it's not a man, it was just a spirit, off with your head. If you say, no, it wasn't, somebody who did this, and that, even though, as Dr. Clarke mentioned, that you found this exact same story, because the story is just talking about the movements of the sun, as we covered in class before. So that's why everyone has a story about dead for 3 days and then resurrection. Everyone has the same story about Virgin Mother. Everyone has all these same elements, because what Dr. Clarke was alluding to is that if he ever existed, then his entire life is plagiarized. You understand? So if I'm a real person, but every single aspect of my life is plagiarized from someone who lived 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, then you have to ask, all right, is this a real person, or is this just not the same story that we find in India, that we find in Persia, that we find in Greece, that we find, of course, in Kemet, which is the source, you know, the oldest attested version of all of it, but everybody's looking up at the same sky. You understand? We were the first ones to document what we saw in quote-unquote democratic form. We put it in story form so that everybody in the society understands it, everyone knows it, and then as you get initiated to higher and higher levels, then you finally understand what was that story, the deeper meaning of this story that we all have access to. But there are lots of books on the Council of Nicaea, so if you're interested in it, you can find out very much about it. It's not a secret to anyone.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Mine is also in two parts, but the first one will be more of the lesson that I learned from the film, and also the last one will be my question. I think Dr. Clarke, because of his intellect, this film was very comprehensive. I really learned a lot. But I'll base my lessons that I learned on education. And with education, we really have a lot or a long way to go. And I think if we're able to follow what he taught us today, we'll be able to unveil the ignorance that we have as Africans. First of all, if we Africans are able to educate ourselves well, then we'll be able to acquire the skills that will be able to help us to produce our own underwear. As he said, we're able to produce our own shoes. These little things are the things that we should start doing so that we're able to liberate ourselves, we're able to have the pure independence that we need as Africans. And my question will come from the education. How can we persuade our leaders to invest in quality education? I mean education that will be able to help us to able to acquire these important skills. Then I'll end by quoting Dr. Clarke, what he said, if we have done it, then we can do it again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The name again, Samuel? Okay. So, your question about how we can persuade our leaders for quality education, I'm pretty sure it will be addressed. Let's take our comments from our dear sister.
In response to what he just said, I'm a little confused as to why we need education to do what we were already doing. Who said we don't know how to make shoes? I mean, I can go to the market and find anybody who can make clothes. The point is that you're not marketing it. It's not that we don't have the education to do it. We've obviously proved that. You can go in the mountains and find somebody who can make you shoes. I can find somebody who can make furniture, who can make art. We have the education. It's not about we don't have the education. You just haven't put it in the form of a factory and mass produced it.
All right. So yeah, who's taking the mic next?
No. All right.
Promise. Washington.
Okay. Hello. Yeah, so the question about what our leaders can do so that we can have the quality education that we need to be able to liberate ourselves. I think we need to start thinking about this idea of always looking up to our leaders to do things for us. Because the real leaders that could really liberate us, we don't have them anymore. They are all dead. And the leaders that we have now are in bed with the enemy. And they are not helping us. And their policies are supposed to help the enemy, and they are now expanding. When you look at current land transactions that are going on. It's like when you read the papers, it appears like colonialism, like it never left, or if it did leave, then it has come back again. So the people need to start organizing again, because the leaders are not helping. They are not conscious. They are taking decisions that are going to kill our grandchildren, and that's not good for us. We need to be able to organize and pressure them so that they can take decisions which will be good for us and our grandchildren. But the decisions that they are taking now, I mean, how could 54 states stay down and let somebody come from Europe or somewhere and come and invade Libya, and then 50,000 civilians died? We couldn't do that anyway. So how is it so easy that they could come and just invade? And they think it's a civilizing mission. And we are all quiet about it. So it's cool. So the leaders have a problem. And the people need to start organizing, and we need to start building movements again. Thank you.
Okay, so I've always found Dr. Clarke to be quite inspiring, and I was blessed to have been able to have met him when I was very young, and I was like, why is everybody, running after this old man? But it wasn't long before I realized why. Now, he said one thing about African people making our own underwear, right? Those of you who know me well know that my underwear is made by African people. Is anyone else here wearing any underwear made by African people? Yeah, I won't show you, I won't show off, but around 1998 I made a decision that I would only wear clothing made by African people every single day of my life for the rest of my life. And for a long time I had done that, except I hadn't had the underwear. But I had old clothes, because once you make that decision, the clothes from 2000 are going to get old. So some of those old clothes, I took them to a seamstress, here in Christian Village, and I told her, make boxers from it. So she made about 20 boxers for me, and that's all I wear. I don't wear European boxers. But I'm saying that to say that imagine if every single person, he's saying, imagine if Farrakhan said, and he said in other lectures, said, I won't ride in a limo until my people make a limo. Let's just picture those of us in this room. If we just made that decision, we're not going to wear underwear unless they're made by African people. We won't disgrace ourselves to wear the underwear of some other people. That's a powerful decision. Now let's look at that across Ghana. Let's look at that across Africa. Just one single decision. If we just took that decision, America would collapse tomorrow. You understand? We don't understand how dependent the West, quote unquote, is upon our supporting them. And that's a decision that each one of us makes. So as opposed to looking at some magical leader who's going to come down from the sky and bring the golden stool, let's think about each and every one of us. How can we make better decisions? And again, it's not every single thing that African people make, but the things that we can make, as our sister said. All right, what if we can make shoes? Then it's my responsibility to wear shoes made by African people. What if my people wear clothes? So I think I'm close to 100% today. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. But this is an intentional decision. So people will look at me, oh, you like culture, oh, that's cute, that's not. This is economic warfare against my enemies, because I don't want to finance my enemies. And I'm always looking for ways to finance them less. I want to starve them and feed my own people. So even though this seems like a trivial decision to wear underwear made by African people, I've just fed this woman in Christian Village. You understand? Just by a change in consciousness and changing a decision, I've changed the lives of people just by making that one thing. So I'd encourage each and every person to think about, where can I attack the enemy? I talk about robbing a bank, right? Does anyone know how to rob a bank? Good, we have one. One good way to do so is for Africans in the diaspora to repatriate, because every single time you're there, you go to the grocery store, you're putting money in the bank. you're paying your taxes, you're paying your mortgage, all those things. But just by taking that decision to remove yourself from that environment, you're financing them less. But you could be here in Ghana and still be financing them. You can have your KFC every day, Pizza Hut every day. You can do all these things. So now even once you're here, now you can think about how can I divest, right? We talk about South African apartheid. One of the main things that was done was divesting. So let's look at our own lives and see how can I divest more. So I'm always trying to gain ground like I'm in a warfare. You know, how can I gain ground on my enemy? Oh, here's one area I can do it. Okay, I can do this in the internet. Oh, I can do this with my clothes. Oh, I can do this with my bag. I can do this. You understand? So everyone, let's look at ourselves and stop waiting for magical leaders to do it, because the leaders are doing the same things that you're doing. So why do you expect them to do different things that you're doing? It's just you don't have enough power to do it on a grand scale, but they're wearing the same things that you're wearing. They're on the same Facebook you're on. They're on the same WhatsApp you're on. We're all doing the same things. But when I make a choice here, now when my power expands, then you see that change throughout society.
Someone, I'm sure you had enough responses, yeah. And I think to add to what you've already had, I think we suggested it here the other day that the existing structures are not designed for our liberation. They are designed for our continuous oppression. And the only way out is for us to develop alternatives. If you want quality education, you need to create an alternative environment for that. Okay? Whatever course you're reading in this university is not designed to liberate you. If you encounter anything close to liberation, it's by accident. The system is not designed to do that. It's only by accident that you sometimes encounter one lecturer who thinks differently, or a course that would push you to ask certain questions. And if you're fortunate, you are going to, have a new path for yourself. But usually, so the answer is an alternative, and Doc has suggested the alternative. It starts with you. Okay. Where do we go from here? Who wants the mic? I know some faces. Mariam, I'll be coming to you later.
Thank you. I really appreciated the presentation. I had seen part of it before a few times, and I'm sure I will watch it again because it's just so dense with information. When I watch events like this, I not only pay attention to content, but I also pay attention to behavior, because for me, Pan-Africanism isn't just how many facts you know, but also about how you do people and how you carry yourself. And so, two things, every time I see this, I'm always curious about Dr. Clarke, and he's not wearing African clothes. And I wish I could hear something about his take on that, his explanation on that. So that's the one piece. And people like Shiganta Jill, who had a white wife, just genius, and he had a white wife. And I would like to hear one of the, sitting scholars, if they ever said anything about it, what their comment is about that in the spirit of what you just said. And then the third thing, Dr. Clarke said about being argumentative, that you get right to the threshold, and then that African people will argue about whether to put the right foot over or the left foot over. Coming here, repatriating to Ghana is definitely really difficult. But I gotta say, with surprising honesty, that one of the things that makes it so difficult is how combative and egotistical and argumentative people can be. And I think sometimes they might be saying, well, I'm debating, or I'm just trying to clarify my point, but it's like they don't have the capacity to recognize that they're being egotistical and they're being argumentative, and that the argument is just going circular. It's not leading to any discovery, new learning, any resolution. It's just going like this. And why don't all of these conscious Pan-African, and when I say all, obviously I'm not literally talking about all, but why it is you think that they don't have the capacity to recognize that, and then to get over themselves and change it. Same thing with Ghanaians, right? I said in a text earlier to somebody, Ghanaians love to shout, my God, just shouting and hollering all the time. What's wrong with talking? It's just, I don't understand why talking is wrong now. You know, just talk. They got a microphone, they're screaming in the microphone. What are you doing? What is that? So I'd be interested to hear some of your comments about that, as well as other people in the room.
My statement to you for the wise wife and I think I can attempt a statement to do, right? Based on the little knowledge I have on French assimilation, the colonial policy of assimilation, and how they pick up the smart people, take them out, and try and mold them into the kind of people they wanted them to be. It's possible he fell in love before he discovered himself. Did you learn that from Ghana?
That's all black people.
You fell in love. You cannot be Pan-African. No way be Pan-African talking about I love white women. You cannot be a Pan-African. Screw Bob Marley. You cannot, I don't care any Pan-Africans, you cannot put forward your agenda then laying in a bed with a white person. Give me a break. Genetically, those people are not in tune with you. They will love one of you, they won't love all of you. I don't know how many times I've been around some white people with some mixed kids, but they tell their mixed kids don't mix with the black ones. You're better. I had a white woman I worked for, and I was stupid at the time because I was young. I wish I would have had the mentality I had today, because I would have corrected her sentence. Her daughter went off and slept with some black man, had a baby. The girl was cute. She told me, yeah, her hair is really nice. It's not dry like you people. She said this to my face. Keep in mind, at the time I was 16. I heard what she said, but I was fearful. She was my boss. She loved her little daughter, her little half-caste. She loved that little girl with the auburn brown red hair, but she didn't like black people. I remember she said to another coworker of mine, yeah, you black people. She wasn't thinking when she said, you black people. Yeah, look at you just standing around being lazy. And then realized who she was talking to, yet not remembering that her granddaughter had a father that was black, and he wasn't light-skinned. You can't be Pan-African sleeping with no white person.
Okay. I don't know if anybody has had the chance to, or if anyone had the chance to question him on that decision before he died. And I don't know,
Dog doesn't want to cry.
Feel free. Interestingly, the African writer, was just here. And the first day he was here, we had a conversation. He was talking about his protege, Aisha Haruna. And he was saying, yes, she's doing this great work. And, you know, she was one of the ones who translated all of these documents. And, yeah, so she got married to a white Frenchman.
What?
And, yeah, she wasn't looking for love. And what he said was, if something like that surprises you, then you'll have a very difficult time living in Africa. I said, I'm not surprised. And, you know, then some days later he was talking about the first PhD in Egyptology, you know, at the University of Cheikh Anta Diop, you know, of Dakar, Yoporika Sommet. And he was saying, you know, and I saw the PhD advertisement, you know, that went out. He wrote it in Middle Necha, and then he had it translated in Kiswahili. I said, wow, this is powerful. And just casually, in another conversation, he said, oh, by the way, he is married to a white French woman. One of the things that comes up is that many people know what they're for, but they aren't very clear on what they're against. people don't mind so much talking about re-Africanization, but they have an issue talking about de-whitenization, which, you know, to some degree may be the more difficult one. We could go through the list. We can talk about Kwame Nkrumah, Marion Arab. These are our first imperialists. You can't be against imperialism, but then you're for Arabs who are the first imperialists who are still on stolen land here in Africa. So we can talk about Kwame Nkrumah. We're here in the Kwame Nkrumah complex, but all of this needs to be discussed. We can talk about Cheikh Anta Diop. We can talk about Fanon. We can go down the list of so many of them. Now, I think that we could critique them ad infinitum, but for me, if I really want to critique them, I critique them through the way I live my life. So if you see my wife, she's blacker than 1,000 midnights. You understand? That's the way that I critique them. So as opposed to pointing fingers and saying, y'all are blah, 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 my critique is I'm signifying on what they're doing by doing something different. I'm raising my own children. We homeschool our children. So my children are African, and I'm letting them be aware of who they are, but then also who their enemies are. And I think for all of those ones we're talking about, they're pro-African, but they aren't clear on being anti the enemies of African people. You understand? So you're for this, but you're not clear on what you're against. So if you know yourself to whatever degree you can, without knowing your enemy, it's like in Yellowstone National Park in the US, they removed the wolves from the population of the park there. So the elk, there was a generation of elk, which is like a big antelope-looking moose thing, that grew up without seeing any natural predators. So later on, they realized that the elk population had gotten too large, so then they decided to reintroduce wolves into the national park. You can read up about this. So when this happened, the elk were just standing there as the wolves were literally just walking up to them. And I'm sure the wolves were like, these are some dumb elk. Now, you know, sometimes we get caught up, you know, that's, oh, well, we're all humans and whatever, but we have to be a bit historical about this thing. I don't think that the elk who started getting chewed up were very consoled by, look, we're all mammals. You understand? We're all mammals, even though you're chewing on my leg, but at the deep down, we're all mammals. You understand? We have to start thinking in terms of self-preservation, knowledge of self, and then also knowledge of enemy. And I think it's very clear throughout history who our enemies are. These pale, quote-unquote, white Eurasians. So whether they go by the names of Arabs, we were talking, myself in the Kwame Nkrumah chair, talking about originally the first Chinese were black, the Shang dynasty. So the ones who were there overran and destroyed that indigenous population. The first Indians were black, the Dravidians. So if you go to North India, they wiped out those who were there. You can only find the darkest ones in southern India for the most part. So you can look all throughout every single place they've been. They exterminated every single full-blooded Tasmanian off the face of the planet. Truganini was the last one, 1876. The only descendants are the ones who they raped and they allowed their half-caste children to stay, you know, on the planet. So we can look every single time this is what they did. So if we're going to be intelligent, then we need to start thinking, who are we? But then also part and parcel of that lesson has to be who are our enemies, and then what should we do about this enemy that history has shown us is there. Otherwise, we keep marrying and we sleep with the enemy. If you have a problem with that, don't go and sleep with the enemy.
I was just saying, and then any comment about the shouting or the arguing, whether the the left foot over, the right foot over first, and all of the argumentative that Dr. Clarke referred to.
Okay. Now, we have other grad students. You know, I tried to make this grad student led, and Na's doing a very good job. Washe is doing a very good job. I know we have other grad students here. So if anyone else wants to weigh in, and then we have fellows here. So if anyone else wants to weigh in about the argumentation. And people aren't rushing up to grab the mic. So I think that part of that is if we actually understood who we are. Yesterday I picked up, no, this was on Tuesday, I picked up a book by the current Minister of Education. It was talking about African enslavement. And I said, we shouldn't call it that, we should call it anti-African enslavement. We're not very clear on what is African versus what is anti-African. You understand? And I'm saying this in the sense of when you actually know that we are all African, then you see that in behavior, right? The proof of learning is in the behavior itself. So if we don't understand that, when we are looking at enslavement, for example, we would find these people who don't call themselves Africans and those people who don't call themselves Africans fighting against each other. And the book was actually talking about in the material culture how you see resistance, building a village on a river, building your structures in such a way, building walls around your entire community, because there's this myth that, oh, we sold our brothers, we sold our sisters, but that's not how it went down. It went down as the Europeans do this gun slave cycle, where y'all folks will give you guns, those folks will give you guns, and we sit back, watch the carnage, and then you sell people who you don't consider to be Africans. So these people aren't calling themselves Africans, they're calling themselves Asante. These people aren't calling themselves Africans, they're calling themselves Ewe. And at the end of the day, the whites are sitting there saying, look at all these Africans, ha 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 ha. At the Berlin conference, they're not saying, oh, let's cut up the Asante in this way, and then let's make sure that Ewe are all in one place. They're saying all of you all are Africans, right? And the Berlin conference is an excellent example because in it, it shows that they said, regardless of the problems that we have amongst each other as white people, those problems will never supersede the problems we have with all of you all black people. It's very clear, you understand? So for us, what we end up doing is we try to hold on to pre-colonial fragments or neo-colonial fragments. Nigerians don't like Ghanaians, Ghanaians don't like Nigerians, you understand? And what either one of those fragments are like is like schizophrenia, or even a better example is like this hand not understanding that it's connected to this jaw. So if you saw somebody walking in the street and hitting themselves like this, you would think this person is crazy. Because if we understand that this is all one whole, that this is all one African self, then you wouldn't have the things going on. But what we have is, this is Asante and this is Fante. We don't like the Asantization of these things. So here's a Fante, they're all Akan, but now they're up in arms. Here's Nana Addo who can't get elected because of beef between Asantes and Achems. And even though they're all supposed to be Akans. But again, if we understand that we're all African people, then we'll see that in the behavior. So the argumentation is because we still think that this part is different from this part, and that part is different from this part. I'm not going to defend the throat because it's not attacking my arm directly. Not realizing, well, if the throat is cut, then all of this goes back into the soil. So again, I think the argumentation will come down once we understand who we are and who our enemies are, because we can't play like that when we have an enemy who's stabbing you in the chest. Then this part, the legs, all parts need to unite in order to take care of that threat. Yeah.
So yeah, from the presentation, John Henrik Clarke was saying like he said some things that are still like ringing in my mind that I'd love to leave out there to also be some pointers for discussion. Like for example, he did say that everything we touch should be a tool of liberation. So we should, I'm thinking of how I can relate that to my present life right now, and as in through my student thesis, through my works inside of this university, how would they contribute to being a tool of liberation? These are things I feel we should be like talking about, how everything that we touch, everything we do, everything we even eat would be like a tool of liberation. Also, he did like mention something I jotted down as symbolisms of like silence. yeah, many times things happen to Africans as a whole, and we sit down and, you know, we are silent about it, and so many issues have gone down. Well, we could mention, in terms of, first of all, we could start with the Gandhi statue on our university campus. How did we react to it? Which was some kind of concrete insult to our mental well-being, if I would put it. Also, even in terms of like Black Lives Matter, how do we respond to it? Why are we always silent? Why are we not being at the forefront of this movement? That means we are not seeing ourselves as Africans, but we are still stuck in this the geography that was like carved out for us. Talking to Professor Horace Campbell today, the question that came up was on his book Rasta and Resistance. A question came up: who is a Rasta? And he did mention that beyond the superficial, Rastas stood against forces of white imperialism. But he said something that Rastas were never bystanders, which I took it down. So if we are going to be fighting against white imperialism, then we cannot be bystanders towards like oppression whenever we see it. So it's also something that we should be talking about, like what does our silence mean? Also, he did mention that we are suffering from a disease that has no doctors. But yeah, so who then would be like doctors, like in terms of the present disease that we are suffering from, where we seem not to even know ourselves? Well, those of us in the university will come out as doctors, will come out as healers, because in a sense we have to arm ourselves with history, whereby, and that's what doctors do. Doctors have the history of a specific drug, so they know that with this specific ailment, because I know the history of this drug, it can alter the course of this ailment. So also as intellectuals, I feel like arming ourselves with our histories would eventually become doctors of this disease, and it will not be a disease without doctors anymore. And he mentions that we have already done what people say should be done. And that was like something very interesting in terms of like our thesis, like this we research on, you realize that Africans have already we've already talked about that or solved it. Talking to Dr. Kambon today on like gender and feminism and all of that, we've already solved the issues of gender. We've already solved inequality, but now we try to make it seem like, oh, like we are progressing, because no, we've forgotten how we did it, and we've got to go back. This will lead me to the Sankofa principle. If we've already done it, then we can only go back and learn from the past. What did we do? How did we solve it? When we incorporated, instead of saying he or she, we made it honor to just, we had already solved it there. Like, also, in terms of descent, as he was talking about, you made mention of West Africa in terms of matrilineal descent, and everything came through the woman. We had already solved the question of like gender, so why are we now pretending like this is a new problem and we must find foreign theories to as in solve this, once again, superficial like problem? So pretty much I feel like these are some pointers we should also keep in mind as we discuss the issue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay, Sam.
Okay, thank you once again. Mine is a question that I've been thinking about for a very long time when it comes to Africa. Should we call ourselves Africans? Because last time I watched Henrik Clarke, and I learned that the word Africa came from a Roman general who was called Africanus around 200 BC. And if we are calling ourselves Africans from an European or a white man, or if we call ourselves a name which was for someone who was not an African, we have to do something about that. because in the olden days, Africa was not Africa in terms of name. It was called Ethiopia, Kemet, and Co. Why don't we use that names instead of African or Africans? Thank you.
Okay. So very quick, for the it's talking about Scipio Africanus, and Scipio means the one who is victorious over, and then Africanus, Africa. Now, for you to have a name like one who is victorious over Africa, it means that Africa had to predate it. So if you just go online, you can look up the etymology, and it's traceable to Afrikia, which is a place around modern-day Tunisia, that area. And it came to be what's called synecdoche, which is where you take fragments of it and then you refer to the whole based on what the fragments is called. You can find the same thing in terms of referring to Africa as Ethiopia, in terms of referring to it as Sudan, and so forth and so on. Now, if you look at various African languages, Kemet means land of black people. If you look at Chi Abibimang, land of black people. If you look at Yoruba, Ila Dulawo, land of black people. If you look at Wolof, Reoli Union, land of black people. If you look at Kikongo from the Congo, and Siabandombe, land of black people, that anytime we want to refer to this land in a name of our own choosing, it refers to land of black people in various languages, and then going back to ancient times. Now, if you look at Latin, Niger, this is referring to black people. Ethiopia is coming from those whose faces are burnt. Ops is the same thing you see in optical, whatever, referring to the eyes literally, but face by extension. If you look at, again, Arabic, Bilad al-Sudan, land of black people. So it's very clear that whatever language we choose, for me, if we're saying Africa, that is equal to land of black people. Anytime I'm talking about black people, I mean Africans. I prefer always African languages. That's why I'm in linguistics. That's why I deal with so many African languages, because I'm looking at things such as this. So my advice would be, first off, the revolution will not be anglicized, right? So we should be looking to our own indigenous African languages and looking at what's our own concept, how do we view the world in our own African languages, and in terms of the land that we're on, from ancient times up to now, it's, that's in common. So, land of black people. Real quick. And then, in terms of the disease, this was mentioned earlier. I was talking about the Gandhi issue with someone from 3FM, and a lot of the reverence for Gandhi was based on ignorance, miseducation, diseducation, anti-education. So people say, oh, Gandhi is great. Okay, fine, he's great. No one has ever read anything by him, whatever. And ignorance is not sustainable, right? Because once people know, you can't, fool them again. So now there's another petition to take down the Gandhi statue in front of the Martin Luther King Center. And because of the groundwork that we did here and others have done in other places, people are signing that thing like this. And this morning, I was a 300 signature. Next time I looked, it's somewhere up to 500 signatures today, and all in one day. So this is moving. And I think about it in terms of, there's an issue of oxygenation in cancer, that cancer thrives in blood or environments where there isn't much oxygen. That knowledge is like that oxygen, and this ignorance around Gandhi and other issues is like cancer. So it can only thrive when African people don't know anything about who they are, don't know anything about who their enemies are. You understand? But as soon as that knowledge comes in, it's like oxygenation in that environment. The cancer's growth is arrested, and then it goes into retrogression, and then eventually it has to be wiped out. That's one. And then in terms of education, I often talk about the work that I do here. It's like, here's a tap that's on, and I'm mopping up the floor. You understand? But we can think about it in terms of the Flint, Michigan. I don't know any of you who followed that. But this is tap water that's coming out that has lead in it, that's acidic, that's poisonous. So everyone is created here in the miseducation system to be that poisonous water. You understand? And what we're trying to do now is even more than just mopping up the floor, even more than just turning off the tap, but we have to have a different source, a pure source of Hari Bibi, black water, the purest water. You understand? So this is what we're doing with Abibi Fahunya Disiambia African Liberation School. We're teaching them Medunesha and African languages. Just on Tuesday, one of the students asked, why did white people enslave African people instead of doing the work themselves? So that then became the class for the day. We talked about the instructions to Mary Carre, trying to explain European behavior over 4,000 years ago, brought it up to two-cradle theory, and that's a lesson. So now they're getting it from young, as opposed to now you're in college, now we're going to start teaching you about something black, right?
Thank you very much. Gogba, it's my name. Let me just start real quick with the government and the leaders, something that my brother was talking about. If you should go back to history and stuff, like, we govern ourselves. Society begins with a family. That is the genesis, or that is the basics of it. Now today, I was just reading something on American constitution, their first constitution when it came into being. And then real quick, they quickly did something and they had to reenact and then make some quick changes and stuff to the third constitution. And then it was of this profound something that I came across, after the constitution came, that third one has been rectified, and then power is given to the people. The people are the sovereignty of a country. I just want to, because we have difference between a country and a nation and a state. So I just don't want to be wrong in that sense. And then the people should have the power. And then there came a whole lot of things like business and stuff. So they created the federal something be that this federal is supposed to be a business corporation independent of the people. And now the people have the power to control this federal bureau, federal corporation, federal something. That is, so the people, the constitution gives the people the power. It's not, let me just not be wrong in that sense of, the constitution does not give power to the people. It's the people who wrote the constitution. So it's the people who give the constitution sovereignty. So the people are, I don't know, even higher than the constitution. They are even above sovereignty. I don't know if you're getting me. It's the people. We say law, constitution. Who wrote the law? Who wrote the constitution? It's the people who wrote it. So why should all of a sudden the constitution have power over the people who wrote it? So the power belongs to the people, we the people. So we should take responsibility for everything that goes on in this country. And right in our own lives, right in our own house, right in every nooks and cranny that we find ourselves. Everything that we touch should be an instrument of liberation, says Dr. Henrik Clarke. Let me quickly run to this place too. He was saying something, Dr. Henrik Clarke, on organized religion. Organized religion devoid of spirituality. It's deep. It's deep. The other time, 2 weeks ago, when we met here, I was like, religion was a tool of enslavement in Africa. And if there's any way we should, or we'll get out of this, we need to how do I put it? Give me a word, real quick. Reprogram, we need serious reprogramming. I don't know. We need to get this off our head. We need to get this religion thing off our head in order to get through. I don't know, some few friends I don't know here the other time. I'm sure their Christianity is so high that they can't just take it and then they're not around here this time around. Sorry for that. If the Bible says Christ, I don't know, like God created the whole thing, blah, 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 and then you were created in the image of God, if that is so, what I got out of it was, right then, Christ, the Spirit of God, has been in you. And then you don't need an external Christ to come and enter you or to come and save you. And then one person was like, how then, if that is the case, the Bible taught them like, Christ comes from somewhere to come and save, I don't know, to save you. So like, it was like, the pagans don't know about Christ. I said, nah, pagans, it's not like they don't know about Christ. They have a Christ in them. So, what is my argument? My argument is this. You are forced to begin with. You are a spirit, a free man, a natural person. This government thing that we have around are like fictitious thing. If you go down history, you will know. I don't know how many of you knows that like licensing your car and something wasn't the case in those days when motor vehicles and things came into being. This was for businesses. Let me run back to my religion thing. The organized society, the organized religion. It has killed us. And now when you look at the Dark Ages, when they went into the Dark Ages, they went back into like the Greek philosophy. When you trace it back, it's from the Kemet in Africa and Egypt. That is where the philosophy came from. Right from like Theophile, Obengas, and like came from Africa. It's when during the Dark Ages, it's the philosophy that they went for in order to like to restructure their society and then to bring back civilization. So everything is just traced back from Africa. Now, when you get into our churches now, their religion is not working for them any longer. To intensify the servitude and then the decompartmentalization of the mind, they are bringing in philosophy into the churches. I don't know if you listen to any the new pastors that you see that are like this is philosophy. Like, why are you telling me philosophy instead of like spirituality? Instead of like me becoming a sovereign being, me becoming a man of power that can do everything on my own. You listen to them. Just give me names of pastors. Listen to this guy now. Otapo. Pastor Otapo. Philosophy. It's philosophy. Listen to this. I don't know, I just got bored with it and I don't listen to them any longer. So but like you help me with the names. That he would build you see T.B. Joshua, I don't know, like Pastor Chris. It's philosophy. It's philosophy. Where if like the religion is not working for them again, so they are bringing in philosophy. The Benny Hinn guy, philosophy. And then trace the philosophy back. It's from that is the kind of guy that I'm even looking for. He is the one. He is the one I'm looking for. Philosophy. We need spirituality. Liberation of my spirit, your spirit, our spirit. And in that case, that is the only way. I think if we become forces on our own, leaders on our own, ground shakers, pillar shakers of this fictitious hula balloon and everything just we have around ourselves, then I think the way forward will be clear. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Gobe. Right? Gobe. Okay. Alright.
Kind of going off what you said about religion, the young lady in the back, she mentioned the Council of Nicaea. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. What he didn't mention to tell you is that Constantine himself was a lone life pagan.
Yeah.
So he himself never followed Christianity. It was a war going on within Rome, the Roman Empire, which was threatening to tear apart the Roman Empire. So that first it was created to preserve the Roman Empire, then it was pushed out to every other country or part of their quote-unquote empire. But he himself, he was a homosexual. He also, which homosexuality was a practiced thing in Rome, which is actually what Valentine's Day is about. Saint Valentine was a homosexual. If you look back, even Sunday was about worshiping of the sun. And then when they went to America, it was enforced that Sunday will be kept. But Sunday is about sun worship. Monday, moon worship. Tuesday is a different god. Saturday is the planet of Saturn. So even the days in which you're worshiping, you're actually secretly worshiping pagan gods, the universe, the solar system. Another thing about Christianity, which I find just a bit amusing, because my husband's a Christian, so you can pretty much assure those debates in our house. It's not fireworks, because I knew and I accepted, but then I still teach him. I sent him, I have a video on my phone about this Dr. Clarke talking about Christianity, so when I watch it, I'm like, I'm going to send this to him. What was I saying? With Christianity, one of the things that bothers me is that you tell us that Jesus came here to cleanse us of our sins, but you still tell me on Judgment Day I'm still accountable for my sins. So even though I was saved, I still have the possibility of burning in hell. The concept of hell was actually, the concept that we know of hell was actually brought to us by Dante, which was, and I'm pretty sure anybody ever heard of Dante's Inferno,
yeah.
which he is the first one. He is the one who have categorized our idea of hell being someplace underground. So when you keep going back in time and you're understanding how the whole Christian religion works, is based off the European system. And then another thing is that Christianity was never meant for us as far as a freedom. They knew that Christianity, and when I say they, the Roman Catholic Church, because that's the head of all religious organizations on earth, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, Islam, they all have a part in the Catholic Church. They used it to colonize Europe. And then when they saw how effective it was, because we don't see that, and all you got to do is go through the Crusades. The Crusades was literally the Catholic Church going around killing everybody who did not agree with them. That's why they moved to America. Then when they got to America, that's when they had the whole war secretly saying, oh, we want our freedom from being taxed. No, you wanted your freedom to be able to create your own religion, your whole other empire, which now they're being ruled by the American empire. And it's funny because when we were taken as slaves, the only thing we were allowed was Christianity. You wasn't allowed to speak your language, wear your clothes, your hair, drumming. Everything was stripped away from you but this so-called religion. And then you were told the whole theory of non-violence, don't fight back. Don't fight back against your master. So it's like, you know, when you, this is like for the Christians here, I'm not trying to break down your belief in God. I'm just saying, actually read what you're reading. You know, understand what you're reading and listen to what you're reading, because it's just telling you to be docile. It's not telling you to think, it's telling you to what to think, not how to think.
Oh, and also Christmas predated, I believe, Christianity about 2,000-3,000 years, and then the whole concept of the Christmas tree, it was worshipped. This is why they have the Christmas tree, is because the Christmas tree was seen as a god. It was the only thing that lived in the winter time. So even Christmas is not even about Christ. Just so you know, neither is Easter. Those are all Babylonian holidays. So every time you go to church and you're celebrating Sunday, Christmas, all of that, Easter, all of those are pagan holidays.
Yeah, I think Doug has given us some lessons about 25th December, 26th December, and what they all mean so far as cosmology matters are concerned. I hope those of you here remember. Okay, yeah.
Oh, it's going to add to the Christianity discussion that I also see all of these as tools which are like basically like counter-revolutionary. So you try to like revolutionize, and then because of Christianity you can because one, there would be some supposed savior from someone who would finally come and deliver you. As to when soon is, I mean, that's the longest soon that has been ever said in the history of whatever. Like Jesus is coming soon, but so yeah, and it's really like capitalist too, and that's what I've been realizing. It's really, and this is like in terms of Christianity and then also like Islam. Islam really, because I'll be taking shots right now. My roommate is Muslim, and I try to analyze how how he lives is. So basically he drinks like this tea, which is basically like Arabic, and his mat from somewhere in the Middle East, like in a mat tea. So basically, as you are trying to, as your mind is being eroded, you are still like enriching like these people as opposed to like your own people. And I don't know, now these are things that I'm realizing, each day as I question, and I'm glad. So yeah, I see like Christianity as really like counter-revolutionary. It's also like really capitalist, you always to go give your money to this person who never gives back to you, and you keep doing it. Well, somewhere it's been said somewhere that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, but we keep doing this, Einstein things, and still like, and we keep doing it. We keep throwing our money. So it's really also it's really like capitalist, and these are, we should also see it as it is and try to get rid of it. Like as Professor Clarke was saying, we should rather go back to spirituality, which you can teach, and every person is their own creature. And also, yeah, talking about capitalism too. Now, talking about like women and gender, like all of a sudden they're trying to talk about, we've got to put women in all of these places that are already like capitalist and all of that. So you see, I'll use like Hillary Clinton as an example, like, this liberal Democrat, whatever, she is, but basically want to get a woman there so that now women can now also like take part in the exploitation. It's not about, really empowering women or making an equal stance or anything. It's just about getting, now let's put women in there so that they can take part in exploitation and all of that. So we've also got to be really critical of these things when they come at us like, oh yeah, why don't you have like many women in there? The problem is not like, there are no many women in there, but the very design, the very structure of itself is something that we should be rethinking. So
yeah, was it last semester, Dr. Kambon shared a quote with me, that religion is the deification of a culture, right? Religion is the deification, to deify your culture. And he gives some illustrations that why do Muslims perform ablution before they go close to God and pray? Why? Why do they have to use such a small amount of water to clean vital parts of their body before they go and pray? The answer is where Islam started from. It's a desert area. Water is what? Came in very scanty quantities. So you use a very small amount of it for what? To clean just the vital parts. Yet we live here. There's a river here. There's a stream here. There's a pond there. There's the sea over there. And yet what do? After you have taken your bath, you still have to go and fetch a small amount of water to clean your vital places. it's a cultural thing. Earlier on, something okay. I think, though, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've learned that so far as the afterlife is concerned in African thought, when you die, you are taken to, in my fragment of Africa I've come from, you are taken to your father's house. The rites are performed for you, and the belief is that you go back and join your departed ancestors. You go and join your ancestors, isn't it? In Christianity, however, it's an individual game. Right? And ever since I was a child, I've always wondered. So, if my mother goes to heaven and I don't meet her there, won't she miss me? When you love someone so much and life ends, and the person goes and is judged and goes to either heaven or the person will not miss you, you also will not miss the person. Why is it so individual centered? And why do you have other cultures that interpret the afterlife as rejoining of your ancestors, and yet one other is telling you, Charlie, it all boils down to you and you alone? That is the culture, alright? The individualist philosophy of Western societies is what is playing out in the religion that they have given to the world. And when you look at your societies, which I'm pretty sure are coming out, they also give a different interpretation that after life, you go back and join who? Your family, who have gone ahead of you. So, look, the name of the person behind the goat, the religion is the deification of a culture.
Dr. Yosef Ben Yakana.
Okay, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakana. So yeah, Sami.
Thank you. I'd like to touch three important things here. First of all, it's about the constitution my friend just here talked about. After US election, I realized that the quote that Abraham Lincoln said was very wrong. The government of the people, by the people, and for the people, that definition. Because I realized that the person who had the most votes was not able to become the president because they said they believe in the electoral college system. And I saw a video from this CNN or something. They talked about how their elections work, and the person in it said that real democracy doesn't work and it's impossible. And because of that, what the people want is not what they are going to get. And I think this is really, should I say, they are really playing down the minds of Americans, because what they want is not what they are going to get. Then why should you go and vote? Why should you believe in your constitution? Because if you want somebody to become the president, the person cannot become the president. So with this, I don't think I think it's very meaningless, their constitution. And the other thing is about spirituality. Now how pastors are really using philosophy in the churches. I think they don't have anything to say because because they want to tell people what they want to hear. You have a double portion. If you are working in a company, at the end of the day, they will promote you, and if you are receiving 1,000 Ghana cedis, the next time you receive 2,000. That's what they want. That's why they are in the church. So they want to hear that. And Bible will not give you those things. So where will you go? You have to go to philosophy. Just allow people to think that way. Influence their thinking so that they will believe what you are saying. So I think that's why Otabel and other pastors are doing. Because if they don't do that, people will not come to their church. Look at the churches who really talk even about revelation, what will happen after we die. People don't want to go there because they think that they are not hearing what they want to hear. And I will also talk about the fashion that Doc said. You know, I've been always thinking about fashion when it comes to Africanism, because we have to wear shirts, tacky, put on your belt, sometimes tie. And last time during my MPhil thoughts class, we went for a seminar on our proposal, and one of my mates was wearing an African wear. It was Friday, and after his presentation on his proposal, one of the lecturers asked him, "Why are you wearing an African wear for this occasion?" And he said it was Friday, and that's why he's wearing that. And I don't know, maybe it affected him in his mark, because the way they took it, I really saw that it will affect him. Because all of us, we are in tie and we are neatly dressed for the occasion. So I remember this thing also happened to Ephraim when he was in Resec over here. He went to church in an African clothes, just like Professor Nketia, and they sacked him because of that. So I don't know whether this thing we should do that, because if you're going for job interview, even if here you're a professor, you're going for inaugural lecture day, I don't think they will expect you to put on the cloth. So should we put on cloth when we believe we are free, or we should dress for the occasion? Because if you are going for an interview, I don't think you put on an African wear and you go. So I think with fashion, it depends. It depends on the occasion that you are going. Because if you want to get what you want to get at that moment, you have to believe or do what they want you to do. Or just leave whatever they expect from you and do what you want. And stay in your own shell. Thank you.
Okay, I think Mario's on is up now.
Finally.
Just a quick follow-up question. Are you saying Western wear is more privileged over African wear in Ghana?
Oh, sure.
It's not. It depends on where you go. All right. Generally, I do not think that I did my MPhil defense here. On the day I came for my paper, I wore some of these shirts I like to wear within. I had my defense, there was no incident. I think when I was doing my proposal presentation, I also had something on like this. I had my presentation, there was no incident. All right. But I've heard stories of people who wore even what we call African print. Are they really African print? At least they are associated with Africa. And there are people who do not even want to see you wear anything associated with the African continent. I know of a gentleman who went for a job interview in African print. Everybody was in suits. And the story is that when the session was over, he was told that he performed the best, but he's been failed because of his clothing. So I can't give a complete picture. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. Yeah. All right, though.
Good evening. I'm Grace Adasti, a religious studies, traditional religious studies scholar, and I'm feeling sleepy anyway, but I just wanted to come in because someone mentioned Ephraim, and I think it was at the Presbyterian Training College at Crossroads, and that is a whole issue and a debate. The discussion is that there is a perception about our dress code, especially when it comes to Christianity. It looks like Christianity came with a different type of dressing other than the Ghanaian or African traditional dressing. And as such,
when he wanted to show his Africanness, the Christians or the whites did not understand him. So it was a problem for them. But Ephraim Amo also proved that no, Christianity is not about your dress and etc. It can be a whole debate. And this afternoon, for example, there was a presentation of identity in the new Pentecostal churches by a friend who is on this HP program. She presented at the linguistics section. We had it at the BAM library. And the churches that you were mentioning, like this Christ Ambassador Church and T.B. Joshua's church, you know, she cited these churches as examples. And the dress code also came in as a form of identity. In these churches, even though they are being initiated by Africans, you realize that the dress code is now different. They try to put on suit, and there's even a reflection on your qualification. You are in Christ Embassy, and you need to have a master's degree, a PhD. And if you want to be a pastor, before you can even be posted to the cities to oversee some congregations, and even they had changed their names, and now it's not like my traditional name Efiatia, but now it is gracious favor, yes, blessings ever, and even their greetings is now is not Machimaha, but it's God bless you. And you know, so it's a whole lot of big so now it's not even about she was into linguistics and religion, but now it's not even about the dress code alone, but it's about even qualifications. Some of these churches, what qualification do you have before you will be ordained as a minister? And also about the language. Some do not even want to speak the Ghanaian language. It's like English, and some are even bringing out grammatical errors. And some too are translating what the preachers are preaching. You know, they are making mistakes. If you don't take care, they are reading something from the scriptures, and it's not the right meaning. And some are even making fun of these. There are some sayings in the society, because someone can say something and the one translated, you know the problems in research when you don't speak the language, and it distorts the whole. Yeah. So I think it's a debate that probably we will look at it at another time when it comes into religion in the African context.
Thank you very much, Tom. So I think something is in the air. It's about the very interesting relationship between Christianity and self-hatred. All right? Christianity in Africa and self-hatred. If you ask me what was the most efficient tool that created self-hatred in Africans, it was Christianity. There's no challenger. There's no challenger.
Quick question, but my impression is too that Africa, a lot of African countries are very religious, and I'm curious to know why so many Ghanaians are Christian and what was the spiritual system before Christianity came, and if there's some kind of connection with their spirituality and Christianity.
Okay, I've also often asked myself why it was so easy for the mass rejection of the African method of worship for Christianity. I've gotten a few answers here and there, but I'm still not convinced. Anyway, I'll give it to Dr.
Okay, very good. Today was a very historic day because I went to a PhD defense for a friend, Anima Wiafi Akintan, and she was doing her PhD defense in Chi. And it's the very first PhD that's been written entirely in Chi and defended in Chi. Wow. So, and this is a long time this university has been here. And she was wearing something like what Dr. Grace was wearing, those same colors in a similar type of pattern. When I did my PhD defense, I was wearing a cloth. You can actually go online and see. Yeah, you can see my PhD defense. I had my locks, I had my beads for the various abosom, and then I was also wearing my cloth. And I won the Vice Chancellor's Award for the best PhD. The year I came out. When I went to my job interview, I had on a different cloth, and I had even more beads on, and I had my hair, tied up in a specific type of way, and I think I had my porcupine quills in my hair. So the former director, Prof. Adamaco, when she saw me in the hall walking to the job interview, she said, "Oh, are you trying to scare people?" I said, "No. I want you to know what you're getting into from the outset." So I got into the room with the dean, Prof. Sebas Ominyo, and he started off. He asked me. He said, "Oh, so I hear you speak Chi." I said, "Hi, I'm Chi." He said, "So would you mind if we conducted this interview in Chi?"
He's in trouble.
I said, "Hi, I'm Chi." Now, I hope you can tune one after the and yeah, Meduma, and they say you're bon That at that point in time, it wasn't even. It was just the novelty of here's this guy from the U.S. who is having his entire job interview in Chi. They started asking me, "What's the name for this? What's the name for that?" And I'm telling them the names of all these technical terms and whatever. So I'll say this, that at a certain point it can be what principles do you stand on. If people think you yourself are shaky about it, then they'll approach you in a different way. If they see me, then they know that if they put a gun to my head, my question would be, how am I going to get this gun from your hand, not whether I'm going to do this insanity you're telling me to do. So, that's that. However, I had a colleague who was the IT officer in the School of Languages, and he's a Ghanaian. He said, I would like to wear my hair like yours, but one time I went up top to the registry, and I hadn't shaved my beard and I hadn't shaved my hair, and they told me to go back home, and when you come back shaved, then you can come back here. Yeah. You understand? So he was like, I wish I could do what you could do. So to some degree, he was like, all right, because you're coming from outside, they'll give you some leeway that perhaps I couldn't get. But for me, I say regardless of, I could have gone to the job interview wearing a suit and tie. I could have done my PhD defense wearing a suit and tie and just oppressed myself to the point, oh, they would never let me get my PhD unless I do this. Oh, and I would never get, I don't care about the job to the point where I'm going to sacrifice principles for a job. No, I could get a job anywhere on the African continent if I so chose to. So if your principles are valuable to you, then you will stand on them. If they're not, people will look at you and you said, joking, and then they'll push you right off of the principles because you don't have principles. Now, also we talked about Christianity being perhaps the strongest or whatever. I was talking yesterday with Prof. Horace Campbell. He said that it's capitalism is the strongest thing ever. Mm-hmm. And then you have other people who, like Chinwezu, he talks about Islam. And I'm reminded of the late Dr. Bobby Wright. You know Dr. Bobby Wright? And he has this text, The Psychopathic Racial Personality. And he gives an excellent analogy where he says that our situation is likened to a bull facing a matador, right? I don't know if any of you have been to Spain to the running of the bulls, but with this they'll have a matador who has his cape out, and the bull sees his red cape and he goes and rushes after the cape, and the matador meanwhile has a dagger or a sword, and as the bull runs by, he stabs the bull one time, and then he comes back with the cape, he extends it again. Then the bull comes running, and then he stabs the bull again. This goes on, up until the point where the bull can barely stand up, if at all. And at that point, this is what they call the moment of truth. And it's believed that that's the first time that the bull ever really sees the matador. Wow. And realizes that it's not the cape that it should be chasing after, it's the matador. However, that point in time comes too late for the bull to save itself. This is our situation as African people, and I've never heard anyone explain this better. But what we do is
we'll look at all these instruments that these pale white Eurasians are using against us, and then we try to go to war against this specific tool. So picture, I'm sitting here, and here's a table full of different torture instruments, and here's a white man who has them. Here's a baseball bat, and he hits me with this. So now I take the baseball bat and I start hitting the baseball bat as though that's the enemy. So this is like when we're talking about Christianity is the worst thing. Christianity, oh, this is so terrible. Meanwhile, he's picking up another tool as I'm beating up this baseball bat. So now here's a dagger, and then he stabs me in the eye with the dagger. That one is called capitalism. So now he puts the dagger down. Now I start beating this dagger and say, oh, the dagger is bad. This is a bad dagger. Oh, the terrible dagger. Meanwhile, I'm not paying attention as he picks up a corkscrew. Then he takes a corkscrew and puts it here. You understand? So they are using various tools. They'll use Marxism, they'll use capitalism, they'll use socialism, they'll use neoliberalism, they'll use neo-patrimonialism, they'll use every ism, they'll use Islam, they'll use Christianity, and they'll pick one up and discard it as the day goes on, at will. And what we're doing is inappropriate behavior, just like the bull and the matador. We're focusing on what this specific tool is that they happen to be using at this point in time, and then like this tool is the enemy, as opposed to being like the bull who finally realizes in a moment of truth, the issue is the one who is using those tools against me. And that's what we're not even supposed to talk about, because if you talk about our enemies who are doing this, now then they have a contingency plan. No, you can't say that because that makes you racist. Focus on the tools. That's reverse racism. Focus on the tools. Meanwhile, we are acting like a stupid bull who's about to die. So I would say it would behoove us to start thinking like intelligent human beings instead of bulls running after these things. A point that Dr. John Henrik Clarke made, and that I also made in my presentation about Black equals African Lives Matter and decolonizing the academy. He said the strongest thing about the people is the same thing is the weakness of the people. If you all remember that. I use that when I teach combat science called capoeira. And if I see someone who's very, buff or whatever, I know that they're not flexible. So I don't engage them in a wrestling contest. I strike them, and then I take them down and they're done for. I just wait. I know they'll get very tired very soon because oxygen has to go to all those muscles. So I'll just wait 5 minutes, then they start breathing hard. So their strength is their weakness. If I see somebody who's tall, lanky, then I say, this is someone who I'll wrestle with. So I won't strike with the person who can reach me from across the room. I will go in. So all of that is to say that we should also be thinking in those terms. He talks about hospitality to strangers, more kind to strangers than relatives, inviting the strangers to dinner without feeding one's children, debating everyone's concern except our own. And in my presentation, I talked about when you're on the airplane, what do they tell you? They say in the event of an emergency, put the mask on yourself before assisting others. Meanwhile, here we are as African people, we're trying to put masks on everyone else and they're breathing just fine. You understand? They're the ones who are covering up your mouth and covering up your nose. Meanwhile, we're trying to take a mask and say, here, you need to breathe. Right? So there's a saying that they talk about after Eric Garner say, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Our problem is that we can't breathe because we're trying to run after everyone else's lung capacity and not worrying about our own. So what Dr. John Henrik Clarke used to always talk about is the essential selfishness of survival, self-preservation. Now we have all types of guilt trips that they'll run on us, they say, no, you shouldn't worry about yourself. Don't breathe, hold your breath. Meanwhile, we'll suck in all the breath, all the air that's here. But these are things that we really have to, consider if we plan on staying on the planet. We also mentioned, Yao mentioned female rulers. The first ruler in Kemet was in the first dynasty, Mary Neith, right at the very beginning and outset. After that, you had Sobek Neferu, you had Hatshepsut, you had all of these various female rulers. So again, we act like this is a new thing that Europeans are finally going to enlighten us of how to have female rulers, when this is something that we were doing 5,000 years ago. So, very good point. Then also, where do we go when we die? So Dr. Clarke said, I'm not going anywhere. There's a very good poem by Birago Diop called The Dead Are Not Dead. That's the translation. It was Les Souffles in the original. But he says, Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen to the voice of the fire, the voice of water, hearing in wind the weeping bushes, sighs of our forefathers. The dead are never gone, they're in the shadows. The dead are not in earth, they're in the rustling tree, the groaning wood, water that runs, water that sleeps. They're in the hut, in the crowd. The dead are not dead. The dead are never gone. They're in the breast of the woman. They're in the crying child, in the flaming firebrand. The dead are not in earth. They're in the drying fire, the weeping grasses. They're in the forest. They're in the house. The dead are not dead, is the voice of the ancestors. So now, physicists will come and tell you that energy is not created or destroyed, it's only transformed. And we'll say, oh, that is such a brilliant idea. But then we'll say, Dr. Clarke will say this, he will say, what a pagan, heathen, savage concept. You understand? Meanwhile, the human body is between 60 and 70% water. When a person dies, what happens to that water? Does it magically disappear from the face of the planet? Or does it just go right back into the system and become a cloud, and then become rain, and then become a plant, and then you eat the plant? You understand? So this is a concept that all African people understood, and that even a child can understand. However, we're taught all these, things that no, we should just turn our backs on it. Then they bring us the exact same concept and call it physics and science. So we should be very, cautious about Trojan horses brought to us by our past, current, and future enemies.
The question of why, when I was born in the 80s, growing up in the 90s, it was a long time after much had happened between Africa's contact with Europe. But what caused the mass rejection of the African methods of worship for Christianity?
Yeah. There's a movie that was done in the 70s by, I want to say it was Usman Semben, called Emeritus. And the context of it is the French are conscripting people to go off into the World War. And they're rounding people up in the village, and the people are trying to fight back. So they are appealing to their deities to help them out. However, the French have superior weaponry, and they're starting to kill all these people. So there's this very dramatic scene where one of the men gets down on his knees and says, Emeritus! He's calling the name of the deity. Why aren't you helping us? We've done all the rituals, we've done all these things. Let's fast forward that Europeans are interested in rewards and punishments, systems of rewards and punishments. So you can look at the very first Africans who converted to Christianity, that they would take, the spoils of having enslaved other African people, and they would give that as crumbs from the table. So they're eating the feast, but they're willing to give you some crumbs. And then other people will see that, and they'll say, oh, look, I'm going to do a cost-benefit analysis. So Europeans are enforcing this thing. It's not that the thing itself it has any value. It's that I'm going to enforce a system of rewards and punishments. If you are willing to say that this imaginary white man of Caesar Borgia is your one true savior, then I will give you this. If you do not do that, then we will shoot you. Then we will cut off your hands like they did in Congo. Then we will, cannibalize you. We'll put your head on a stake. So, when you're looking at the origins of this conversion, a lot of it has to do with the different levels of power that Amos Wilson talks about. So one is power as brute force. You have power as coercion, power as influence, and then power as manipulation. So they were using the more rudimentary levels of power in terms of brute force early, then they went to coercion, then they went to influence, and what they're doing now is manipulation, which is the most effective because it's the hardest to fight back against. And this is what we're seeing now. So even during colonialism, you didn't see such a mass thing as what you see now, because what they're using now is a much more sophisticated weapon, which is manipulation as power. And all of it boils down to rewards and punishments. You will get this huge church, which is the crumbs that come off of the table out of the trillions that they steal out of Africa. But you'll be, the head slave on the plantation. You understand? So look at all of these things very simply in terms of rewards and punishment, cost-benefit analysis. And then also you can think about it in terms of natural selection and artificial selection. That on plantations, they would do artificial selection, which is that if you are somebody who's fighting for your liberation, then we will kill you and make an example out of you. We won't kill you easily. It will be something, you know, pulling your different body members apart, you know, tarred and feathering you, all these types of things, butt busters, all these types of things. You understand? So this is what you would do, but then someone who's willing to, like the Gandhi Masan people, willing to put your tongue inside of Gandhi's orifices, then they will reward you. You understand? Now you will be the one who is able to pass on your genes. So in a documentary called Cosmos, I think we talked about this. Yeah. They talked about how all dogs are descended ultimately from wolves. However, there were some whose genes were slightly different, that they were less afraid of fire, less afraid of men. You know, so those are the ones that are going to come closer. And now it goes from survival of the fittest to survival of the friendliest. And this is what's going on with African people, that if you are willing to go with what these pale white Eurasians say do, then they will reward you. They'll pat you on your head with grants, with funding, with a job, with all these different types of things, right? So that's artificial selection. You've gone out of the pale of natural selection to, you know, the best Africans are the ones who are going to survive, to know you'll be able to feed your family if you go along with this. So all of these things boil down to rewards and punishments and then cost-benefit analysis.
Can you go back to what you just said about putting your tongue up there?
Yeah, there's this group that's calling itself Gandhi Must Stand. And basically, when you are willing to kiss the butts of your enemies, then they are making a cost-benefit analysis and say there are benefits to licking the toes of Gandhi. So they will lick them and hope that they taste like samosas. Right? Whereas other people have principles and say, I don't care, you know, what the quote-unquote benefits are, what funds or whatever comes with it, I'm not willing to do that.
So y'all have a counter movement,
Yes.
saying that we should.
Yeah, a very feeble one though. So we have 1,900 signatures, 1,900 signatures. They've been stuck around 200, which is, you know, in light of all of the Gandhi propaganda. Now, that's what I'm saying, it's like a cancer. Now that knowledge is in the system, that's like oxygen, it can't breathe, it has to thrive on ignorance, it's not sustainable. So all you do is introduce knowledge into the system. Now they can't grow. So with all the decades and decades, all the people he conned, including Nelson Mandela, he conned Nkrumah, people are saying, no, we're taking the truth as authority instead of these authorities as the truth. You understand? So it can never come back again now that oxygen, now that knowledge has been infused into the system. The cancer is in remission now.
One of the things that I was thinking about when I was watching the film was the interface of diasporans and Ghanaians when we're coming here and what that dynamic is like. And I've been having some interesting conversations over the last couple of years with people about that. And I was at the mall last night having yet another conversation about that unexpectedly, and I didn't leave there till about 11:15. And one of the things that this Ghanaian who had been born here, left here as a child, raised in the States, had absolutely insisted upon being true, is that when we come back here, and again I'm kind of thinking in the spirit of what Dr. Clarke is talking about, he's saying that when African Americans in particular come back here, the Ghanaians will never accept you, they will never receive you, and you will always be the other. And part of it made me sad, and I had a brief period of time where I had to fight back tears. But then after that, I remember pushing that aside, and I was like, Jennifer Holiday said, "You're gonna love me," when she sung that song. And I found that I apparently had been on this vendetta to say, well, I'm just gonna be the exception to the rule, because I'm not gonna fly 7,000 miles, and wait for hundreds of years to finally come back here, only to have somebody say, oh, you're not Fanti, oh, you don't speak the language, oh, this and this and this, because to me that's also colonized behavior, that's colonized thinking, that you can't even recognize the simplicity that somebody who looks like you has come back home and you already know at least generally the history and you don't receive them. And it just is so anti-African to not receive your own, especially after coming through some harrowing experience like that. And I was telling the guy, I said, you know, a lot of African Americans when we were in the States, and I saw my mother do this when I was coming up, when someone comes into town and you know they don't have anybody, they don't have any people, you just kind of adopt them, you just take them in. Oftentimes to the point that they might even be in your will. They'll be in your obituary, they'll be on the front seat or second row with family at the funeral. I mean, they are just in like Flynn. And sometimes people may call it kinship or some other type of care, but you're just family. Whether you're Sudanese or whether you know, you're from the South, New Orleans or somewhere, wherever it is, if you have some certain kinds of situations going on, people will just take you in. And this was one of the things that Brother Ayi Koryama was saying when he was in the class one day. He made a reference to that spiritual adoption, that the intellectual child or the child of love or the child of spirit, and bringing that in. And it's curious to me when you talk about how Christianity was just taken in such mass, almost sometimes seemed like it was unprotested, although, of course, you know, when you lay it out, you can begin to see how it was, but it was so systematic and so toxic and so virulent. But it makes me wonder now what's happening. So that I would even think that even in this room, those of us in this room, if we was to play date night and pretend everyone in here is single and just try to pair everybody up, a Ghanaian with a Diaspora and vice versa, that we would still probably enter and experience some of those same dynamics. I should hope not, but I think we might. And it makes me wonder when you talk about the behavior matches the knowledge, the understanding, how much progress we really are making, if that's the case. You know, we're saying a lot of cool and amazing, wonderful things, but if at the end of the day you see me and you think, oh, here go my ticket to the States, you know, you see me and you think, oh, American must have money, I'm a holla, then it's like, we didn't even make any progress, because now you're about to step to me, not as one man to woman and say, well, I like your mind, I like your energy, I like how you flow. You're stepping to me in some weird, peculiar, hybridized way that's totally anti-African. So. Thank you.
I've been here for 7 years, so whatever I gotta say it trumps yours. No, from what I've experienced, because me, I don't speak any of the local languages, but I'll try. Like what you say when I said, we do that in America, but not exactly like that.
How do you do it?
Yeah, we don't. So, what I noticed is, for one, if any of you have the chance to go to America, you'll realize what she's saying is the same thing what y'all say, that y'all are not received by a lot of the African Americans, because everything that's associated with Africa is negative. And then what I see here is that what they encounter is that a lot of them who have family that's in the States, they have already been told by their family, oh, stay clear of these people. There's some way, the Akata, they'll ruin you, but they'll definitely say for Black Americans, they're Akata, they're violent, they're this way, they're this way. And me, my experience I had is that I've always been received, because I always went with an understanding and then an attitude of teach me. So it depends on the individual if you go there, because Americans always felt like that what they know is here, even above Europeans, what we know is here, and Europeans is here, and then Africa's down here. But if you go to them with the teach me attitude, or make me understand, because it's many things that Africans, not just the Ghanaians, but the Nigerians I met, just seems completely strange to me. But then I ask you, well, then why do you do this? And why do you celebrate that? And then why do you say it like, and then how do you say it like this? And then you're received. More than when you're going towards them with the attitude that, oh, you should do it like this, we do it like this, so you should do it like this. There's always going to be this difference. Because when I see an American, I can tell you you're an American from across the room. And I know you're an American just by the way you look. But when you come here and you feel like you already got your reserved attitude and you feel like, you know what, I don't know, then just go. Because me, I didn't come here with a tourist group. I didn't come here. I came here and I straight up went to the market. And I just bargained like that. I came here and I just mixed amongst the people. And I just learned. I took the Trojan. I did everything. I still take the Trojan to this day. Just mix in and learn as you go. And then have an open spirit. And you won't really
that's common sense.
Yeah.
I'm saying that this guy is saying that no matter how hard.
Maybe that's his experience. He's trying to tell you something from his experience, and because I left by that time. I was with her, but by the time you met him, I left. But see, then a lot of Africans who have went over there, then they come back and they feel like, oh, I'm more esteemed, like no more. And yeah, maybe that's the probably attitude that you met from your family, but me, I can't say that from every Ghanaian because I'm here. And it was like, what, 3-4 Americans in this room, the rest of them, I don't feel the fact that I'm pretty sure everybody here would say, oh, if I say I'm hungry and I don't have money to get home, how many people will offer to help me get home? It was almost the whole room. A couple of hands didn't go up.
I thought it was a rhetorical question. I didn't raise my hand.
But the point is that in America, you can ask somebody for money and they'd be like, I know you like that.
But he was saying that, and it could have been his own experience. I don't know, it just sounds interesting. It could have been his own experience, but he was saying that, because I was talking to him about like these types of events and some of the WhatsApp platforms, and he was like, it doesn't matter how hard you all try, the Ghanaians will never accept you. They will always see you as a foreigner, as the other, as the stranger. He was like, you can bank on it, you can count on it. They will look you in the face and nod and smile and agree and say, oh, Charlie, this and this and this. But he said, I'm telling you, they do not see you
Well, let's ask the Ghanaian.
as if. And so therefore I was curious, I wanted to put it out in the discourse.
I want to hear a Ghanaian, somebody African.
I'd like to hear what's your experience.
What I experienced?
After being in
Ghana all these years,
How many years have you been in Ghana?
It'll be 3 in February.
and almost 3 years, do you feel that all the people you meet, all the people you have been together with have not really accepted you?
Not all.
Not all, of course.
Yeah, not all.
But somehow.
But a lot.
A lot have.
A lot have not.
A lot have not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like for instance, example. So the neighbors who I'm the only African American, if I can use that term, in my village. So my immediate neighbors, when I go to my garden, I pick stuff and I knock on the door. I go, and I give them the things from my garden. Or if when I have my water fill up in my poly tank and it's not enough, then I just have them automatically put it in theirs. I never ask them for money for that. I do all of these types of things. And in almost 3 years that I've been here, I have never been invited to anyone's house for dinner except 3 times, and 2 of those 3 times I invited myself. And not only that, typically, I don't know about your experiences before you got married, but typically when men express interest in us, it's not long before they want to talk about they want to go to America. I'm not making this up.
Yeah,
and it doesn't seem sincere, and it doesn't seem like it's a genuine interest.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Have I, as Ghanaian, accepted some African Americans or Africans, black people who have returned to Ghana? Yeah, I have. Dr. Kambon is our boss. Every day we don't want to miss an opportunity to go and have a chat.
Yeah, because it's a
you're always learning something. And he is very, very open and willing every time. But of course, I've heard your story, but I think what the gentleman said, in spite of some evidence in support of it, it cannot stand on its ground, because I think there's quite a good number of Ghanaians who would accept you.
I've been invited over to several people's houses.
So,
They've done everything.
I just figured it's my locks, or maybe because I'm by myself.
And in my area, and I'm definitely gonna call it a village. That's what it feels like. They call me Obruni. Obruni.
Yeah.
Those who know me call me Sister Yaya. But the kids Obruni. I just look at my skin and I'm like, oh.
You are not Obruni at all.
I know, but I know that it's also an educational thing too. That's what they know as foreigners. But me, I feel like it comes part of your attitude towards them.
Yeah.
How willing are you willing to accept them?
Yeah, I don't get that. It doesn't matter how willing I am to accept, and how many soccer games in my village I go to and shout and cheer, and how many times I talk with taxi drivers and let them teach me to try to speak Chi or Ga or Ewe or whatever. At the end of the day, they all go and do their thing, and I'm just kind of like, hey.
What does acceptance look like for you?
She just want a free meal.
Acceptance.
Mario, have you been accepted? You were in Nairobi for a year, you told me. But did you feel accepted?
In Nairobi?
Yeah, in Kenya.
Yes and no. I guess it depends
Yes
on the
and no,
individual.
yeah.
Yeah, it depends
Where
on
are
the
you
individual.
from?
I'm originally from the Caribbean,
Okay.
but I lived in the United States for a long time.
Alright. How many hands are up? I think we should be close to ending. It's about 8 p.m.
Please put this on record. Yeah. My master was asking how then is there a way of like rejection, a mass rejection of Africans' way of worshiping Christian, like Christ? First, it is not your religion. It is my religion, and I give it to you to do. So you can't do it your way. You have to do it my way. That is the reason. Simple.
Okay, it's on record.
On the issue of acceptance, I do feel your pain because I do tend to spend some time when I'm not here in Cape Coast. I've got a friend, right, who lives right by the beach, and I go to spend some time with him. And you see how, especially like with Diaspora and Africans, when they pass them by, the Rastas who have their shops and all of that, they'll still call them Ogronis, their kids will call them Ogronis and all of that. So it tends to say something then, especially when you're going into a slave dungeon. One of the most saddest days of my life, I was going with a friend who is Diaspora and African, so we get in there, they want to charge him an Ogroni price, like, they're like, you're gonna pay 40 cedis, and that's what Ogronis do pay, whilst Ghanaians would pay 30 or something, or 5 cedis, yeah. But this is someone who recognizes that this is where my ancestors, if not might have come from, they came from, at that very time. And then they were just rude about it. You either pay or you don't. He was just broken. Like, I'm going to pay homage to what could have been, the last, place whereby my ancestors had their foot when they were here, like, on the land. So it was really like mentally devastating. So I do understand also from that perspective that sometimes just, from that connotation as American or someone from the West, you are seen as an other. But other than that too, there is also like a conscious group of Africans, of Ghanaians who have their arms also open to, like whoever, no matter where they may be, so long as they're black, they see them as brothers and sisters. And there is like a lot of us here too. So yeah, I mean, I do see both ways, and it's something that we should also, in a way, like be engaged with. And I think what I was bringing in Dubois and all of the talk on double consciousness, but in a way too, it also comes from the diasporan side and how they react when or how they respond, being around here. Having to lose that American side to may also be. But anyways, it's a whole issue that maybe we may talk about sometime.
Alright, so brief one, and then the lady beside you.
Okay. Mine is I would like to talk about your question when you were there about worship in the church, and also my last will be on the acceptance. I think these churches, they are able to overtake Africa or Ghana with church because of how they have changed the type of worship. I'm a Pentecostal, and I read the history of my church, and I realized that the first missionary they brought here was under the Apostolic Church. And when he came, they had their doctrines that they have to follow, that if you are sick, you are not supposed to go to a hospital. You should allow the elders to pray for you so that you get your healing from that. And this missionary got malaria, because that's the disease they really get here. And because of the situation, he went to the hospital, and the doctors gave him medicine, and he was able to heal. And they said because of what he has done, it goes against the church doctrine, so they have to, let me say, demote him from being a pastor or being a missionary. And what he did was, he had people who believe in that sense as a pastor. So he gathered those people and he started his own church, and he named it Pentecost. So, and what he learned was that Africans or Ghanaians, we believe in dancing, because the traditional system, when you go to the shrine, they dance, the Okomfo, how they dance before they say, oh, like how Okomfo Nochi did, and you commanded the Godins to the dancing and other things. So he said if that's the case, then you bring that to the church, so people can dance as a form of worship. And last semester I went for an inaugural lecture. That's where I really understood that history, Professor Omenyo. And he said that his lecture was about the growth of churches in Ghana. And he said that the Pentecostal churches are growing faster. And he brought the emphasis of that type of worship. That's why a lot of people are going there, as compared to the other churches where you stand and you sing hymns. So from this, I realized that because of the type of worship that we have in the churches, that's why a lot of people are easy to convert into the churches as a form of response. So they dance a lot, and we like dancing. You dance after sweating, then you will sit down and you will listen to the worship. And my last thing about the acceptance, I think this one, it depends on where you are staying or where you live.
Ampuma village.
Okay, every community and the type of people they live there, there are communities where people are more together. I will not talk about maybe their culture or their tribe, but there are some communities where people live together. And if, for example, in Accra here, we have a lot of communities where a lot of people come from different places, and because of that, they see themselves as individuals. And if they are individuals, they don't want to have anything to do with the community as a whole. So if maybe you get to other parts of Ghana, especially when you come to my part of the country, people are more acceptable, or they really accept people easily. If you are an outsider, they always try to befriend you, have a lot of relationship with you. And They don't care whether even you come and stay with them in their homes, eat together, do everything together. Even if you want to be, at the end of the day, if you want to be buried in their burial ground, they will allow that. So I think it depends on where you are living. Maybe when you go to other parts of the country, you may see different types of people when it comes to acceptance. Thank you.
So we'll take the final words from Dr. Campbell and we'll call it a day till we meet next week, Thursday.
Yeah, I think just in terms of acceptance, one thing that I find, and this is what most things in school seem to need it or want it the most, get it the least. And those who, seem to want it the least seem to get it the most. So if you're a type of person who really needs acceptance or really needs applause or whatever, people won't give it to you. But if you're just doing your thing and you're like, I'm just doing my thing, that's where you're getting. I find that that's, one thing that, how it pans out. But then along the lines of what our young sister said, and what I also heard before, is that it depends a lot on the specific African you're dealing with. What level of consciousness is this person? Yeah. And I've gotten it from both sides of the oceans because when I was younger, I grew up in the South in the 1980s with the name Obadele Kambo. So people say this is an African. So they call me African Booty Scratcher. I don't know if you've ever heard that. I got called, oh, you so black, all types of stuff. So, I've gotten, so if I just generalize and say, oh, they're treating me like how a continental African would do it, then I would make a generalization and say, well, how do Africans in the diaspora accept continental Africans? Growing up, it wasn't very good. But then by the other side, you can see this. At this point, I don't necessarily even look for acceptance. I mentioned I was at this PhD defense, and it was on the use of Akan language on radio and TV. So she had her whole title in Chi, but then she had radio and TV. So I raised my hand, and I said, do you know the word for radio or TV in Chi? So now everybody, she said she doesn't know. Nobody else in the room knows, so everybody says Dr. Kambo. You understand? So it's a thing of, that's a degree of acceptance, but that's not what I'm looking for. I was looking to do something related to my destiny on this planet. So because I'm doing that, then other people are looking at me, as, I guess, acceptance or whatever. I went to Agree Botanical Gardens. I speak to them. They charge me the Ghana rate. I go to the dungeons. I speak to them. They charge me the Ghana rate. When I first came to the University of Ghana, before they saw my passport, they for the PhD, they charged me the Ghana rate. And then I paid into the bank. I said it was 400 Ghana cedis. Wow. I said I could be a student for the rest of my life. This is cheap. I can do this. But by the time I got back to the grad school, they said, no, we saw your passport. You understand? So, just in terms of the monetary aspect and things like that, some of it comes down to, actually what passports are you holding and things of that nature. But I think that generally, if you are clear on who you are, and if you're not like, just please accept me, the acceptance will come just because you're living out what your destiny is. And once you're living out what your destiny is, it really won't matter whether you're accepted or not, because I'm doing what I'm supposed to do on this planet. So, regardless of whatever, I know I'm African, so regardless of what anyone else says, I'm doing what I'm here to do. And then, you may find that it comes. So, now.
I told you what the man of the thing said, not what I said.
You just want a free meal. That's all.
But again, it depends on the consciousness. So if you're with people who don't know that they're African and don't know anything else, then they may not accept you. But if you're with Na, then he would accept you. So you're talking about somebody with zero consciousness versus somebody with a high level of consciousness, and then you're trying to generalize and say, what do Ghanaians do? It would be the same fallacy as if you took a continental African, put them in a project somewhere, they'd be like, you're African booty scratching. Go back to the jungle, blah, blah. But what has been put into their heads, and then what's been put into the Ghanaians' heads,
to make their level of consciousness very low. But take that same continental African, put them in an African-centered school, you understand? Then this person is the resource person. This is the person who's going to teach Ghana. You understand? So just by trying to generalize all of Ghana, it depends on the level of consciousness of the people who you're interacting with. The exact same thing over there. One of my colleagues, Dr. Numbing there, he said when he went to South Carolina, 2 brothers tried to rob him. There's somebody who's going there with a level of consciousness like these are my brothers and sisters, whatever. And luckily he had studied some self-defense and he was able to whoop up on them, you know, and carry his groceries back on home. But you know, what if you generalize and say how well a continental African is received by Africans there? He's dealing with very low-level consciousness people who are trying to rob him. But again, it depends on who are you interacting with before we try to generalize to what do all Ghanaians do, what do all African anti-Americans in my case, or African Americans in other people's cases do. So yeah.
Before you put the mic down, just do you go back to the States?
I don't set foot on U.S. soil, so I don't go to the embassy.
So you haven't been back?
That's
yes.
A
no.
Yes, to put it mildly. I wanted to, in my response, include how despicable I would consider ever setting foot on U.S. soil to be, unless perhaps it's as a conqueror. But that's
See, I wanted to ask you, how are you received now, but you haven't been back?
No, I teach people online, so I interact with Africans from that side, but I don't go back.
So you haven't been back in how long?
2008, I came 08, and I have no plans on ever going back to the U.S. Yeah.
Well, this is part of what, if I can just jump in real quick, what people are encountering as they are repatriating is that just like this guy was trying to convince me that I will never be accepted.
Because he's low.
You know, it's and this guy is a high-ranking, you know, highly educated, affluent person.
Anti-educated,
what's happening? Well, of course.
Yeah.
But what's happening is that as people are repatriating and they're trying to get logistical information, they're trying to get cultural information or whatever, if they meet someone like this who's telling them, look, yeah, it's nice that you go into the campus and doing this, and it's nice that you playing billiards with the guys in your village, and da-da-da-da-da. They will never accept you. They will never do this, da-da-da-da-da. For the average person, that's difficult for them to you know, to overcome. Yeah.
Imagine my colleague who got robbed at gunpoint. That would be difficult to overcome.
I just wish that throughout your stay here, you would encounter enough counter evidence to what he has said.
Oh, myself, when you asked me the question, I've had both.
Yeah, both.
You know, I would be just lying if I didn't say I had some really good experience. But unfortunately, I've also had a lot of bad experiences, and it's not because I was misbehaving.
Okay. So it's been a very long but fruitful, stimulating interaction. Some of you have sat through to the very end. You didn't say a word. Maybe I understand. Sometimes as undergrads, even as graduate students, when you hear the bosses talk, you be like, hey, it's better to keep quiet and listen than to share the little I know. But I encourage you, keep coming. I hope and keep coming and make the attempt. You know, we value your voices. So next time when you come, we'd like to hear your voice as well. But I do hope that next time you come, don't be like those Christians who, in God's friends, who came and they heard stuff they didn't want to hear about Christianity. So yeah, next week we are having.
Next week is Black Power, the Kwame Nkrumah documentary.
Okay, next week, Black Power, the Kwame Nkrumah documentary. Promises to be stimulating as well. So I hope I'm going to see all your faces and bring your friends who are teachable. Alright? And we're so grateful that you came, and we'll be looking forward to meeting you next week. So go well, and have a nice evening, have a nice weekend, take good care and come back.
Let's do a group photo up front before everyone leaves.
Okay, today there's some icing on the cake. We'll take a group photo before everyone leaves.